Brother, you are amazing. I will follow you forever. Cain Stallard held on to 13's right hand while kneeling on the ground. Brother, I will follow you for life. Derek, who had also returned to the Leventis residence 2 days after Mikhail and Shasha returned to Pangea, also knelt on the ground while holding his left hand. Who the F***CK is your brother? 13 replied as he pried away his hands from the hold of the 2 teenage boys who had a crush on Shasha. Tiona, bite these fools. Shah. Tiona didn't hesitate and summoned her clones to lunge at Cain and Derek, who hastily backed away to distance themselves from the Domini Mortis. As if fate was mocking him, Cain and Derek arrived at the same time at their house for a visit. To make matters worse, 13 didn't know that Derek also had a secret crush on his sister, Shasha, making him regret ever teaching the stupid swordsman one of the best divine martial sword arts he possessed. Shasha, who was already used to this scene, only hugged 13 from behind and whispered in his ears. Just tell me if they annoy you, Zion, Shasha said. I'll cut off their limbs and send them back to their homes in a box. That sounds like a good idea, 13 answered. Let's do that. Ouch, that's going too far. Cain, who had heard what the 2 siblings were planning, couldn't help but voice out his complaint. 13 clicked his tongue and asked Tiona to return to him, making the 2 teenage boys breathe a sigh of relief. Master, thank you, Derek said. I promise to do my best to make Shasha happy. Huh, what the hell are you talking about? Cain grabbed hold of Derek's collar and pulled him close to him. That's my girlfriend you're talking about. Do you want to die, girlfriend? Derek sneered. As if. He then glared at Cain, the thorn in his eyes. Master will never accept a weakling like you to become his sister's boyfriend. Huh. It seems that being part of the hero party has arrogantly made you think that you are strong. Huh? Let's take it outside and duel each other. Exactly what I have in mind. Master, you'll be the referee. Watch me obliterate this punk. 13 clicked his tongue in annoyance before shooing the 2 bastards outside of the house so that they could duke it out with each other. Soon, the sound of explosions reverberated in the surroundings, but he no longer gave a care in the world. It's so troublesome to have a very strong and beautiful sister, 13 said to Shasha. You must be exhausted dealing with these idiots. Well, compared to me, brother seems to be doing better with his girlfriends, Shasha commented with a smile. 13 blinked once then twice after hearing his sister's words. Girlfriends. 13 arched an eyebrow. Mikhail has girlfriends? I don't have girlfriends, Mikhail replied with a beet-red face. Only have female friends. Shasha, don't create misunderstandings. Zion, you should have seen them, Shasha smiled sweetly. All of them are born from well-off families. While their families aren't on the same level with the monarch clans and the prestigious families, they stick to brother like glue. 13 nodded in understanding. As expected of Mikhail, you didn't make me lose face when I taught you everything I know about how to deal with girls. Mikhail, who knew he was at a disadvantage, chose that time to leave the living room, making 13 and Shasha chuckle together. When she was certain that her older brother was truly nowhere in sight, Shasha whispered in her brother's ear, making 13 arch an eyebrow. Cain's sister has a big crush on Mikhail, Shasha whispered. She was with us in this mission, and she was doing her best to get on his good side. But as expected, brother isn't good with aggressive ladies. Indeed, 13 nodded. But since Mikhail wouldn't open up easily to anyone, only aggressive girls can break the ice. Those who are too shy and too timid will not be able to reach him. Shasha nodded in agreement. She was no longer a child, so she also understood that sooner or later in her life, she would need to choose a partner to settle down. Unfortunately, Zion had raised the bar so high that Shasha would only consider having a relationship with someone who could surpass her brother's achievements. Even if she and Mikhail were to become champions, in their hearts, Zion would always be stronger than them. How about you, brother? Shasha asked. I'm sure you have your fair share of suitors. Mother said that she received several marriage proposals for you when the 2 of us talked last night. Well, I suppose I am popular, 13 replied with a smile. But enough about me. What are we going to do with those 2 dunderheads? Should we call the cops? Shasha giggled before shaking her head. Cops can't do anything to them. You already know that, right? As if waiting for that moment, the sound of explosions grew even louder, making 13 sigh. His peace lasted only a little more than a week, and now he had to deal with two annoying pests who just couldn't take a hint. Somewhere in Solterra, a young lady, sitting on top of a pile of monster corpses, looked toward the west, where a Tier 1 dimensional gate was slowly dissipating. Her long blue hair fluttered in the breeze, and an arrogant smirk could be seen on her angelic face. "Roxy, when will the solstice begin?" Siri asked. 10 days, my lady," Roxy replied. "Oh, what a long time." Siri slowly stood up and did a few light stretches. "Are the preparations done?" "Yes, my lady," Roxy replied. "We're just waiting for the day of the solstice to arrive." "Good." Siri rested her hands on her waist, looking satisfied with Roxy's answer. "Did Mother say anything?" "Yes," Roxy nodded. "She said that you should meet her tomorrow while there is still time." "Understood," Siri commented before jumping off the small hill of corpses and landing on the ground with no sound, as if she had floated down like a feather. "Let's go, Roxy. I will be busy after the solstice. I will leave everything in your capable hands while I am away." "Yes, my lady." Roxy bowed respectfully before following behind Siri. Although she had some reservations about her lady's decision, she also understood that it was time for her to leave the nest. "I just hope that she and Zion Levinas will not be on the same mission," Roxy thought, "because if they are, that boy will certainly end up dead." The handmaiden knew what kind of girl Siri was. The more the blue-haired girl found something interesting, the more she would want to break it. That was just her personality. Although she didn't really care about what would happen to Zion, she found it a pity that such a talented individual would not become one of her lady's retainers. Roxy believed that if Zion became Siri's strategist, then the two of them could do many amazing things. Unfortunately, what she wanted and what Siri wanted were two different things. One wanted stability, the other wanted destruction. Since the one who wanted destruction was her master, then the only thing she could do was obey her orders and pray that they would find a better strategist in the future. The days passed swiftly with Kane and Derek rabidly hounding each other as rivals for Shasha's attention. However, in front of her guardian, Zion, the two were like two loyal puppies that could only wag their tails and behave properly. In the end, seeing that his love rival was being trained by his future brother-in-law, Kane decided to join Derek's training under Zion's supervision. To the teenage boy's surprise, the two fools' progress was quite fast, and the two of them had gotten stronger after just a few days of training. Perhaps their rivalry was pushing the two of them to outdo each other, creating results that made 13 shake his head because it was outside of his calculations. In the end, he just summed everything into a few words. It's hard to predict what idiots do. A few days later, the members of the hero party returned to the Aldebaran continent as promised. It was not only them. Rihanna, Viola, Louise, and Sharon also came. There were only 3 days before the night of the solstice, and everyone seemed to have already been done with their final preparations. Sitting on the roof of their house with Rhea sitting on his lap, 13 looked at the setting sun in the distance. "Tomorrow, I will finally return to Solterra," 13 thought. He spent 3.5 years in Pangea after his return from Solterra, but those days were always busy. Creating Athena, supervising Project Nautilus, and engineering the E-Gandam Dual Master virtual game took all of his time. Project Nautilus was a very ambitious and expensive project, and he needed vast amounts of funds in order to build it. Because of this, he created a company named Noise and introduced Gandam to the world. Due to its massive success, he earned billions of gold coins, allowing him to fund the creation of Nautilus. The excess funds were allocated to his other projects, including his father's crafting training and his mother's alchemy concoctions. Regarding everything he had done the past 3 years, 13 knew that all of them would bear fruit in the future. Being the supreme commander of the Alliance wasn't his original goal. However, since it would be more convenient for him if he was in a position of power, he used schemes in order to raise his rank and influence within the central government. His 69th Battalion, who had been a laughingstock of the army in the past, was now hailed as heroes. No matter where they went, the label of being part of Zion Levinas' personal army gave them perks and benefits, which they didn't expect to receive. Al Capone, the leader of the mafia within his battalion, was now a celebrity. Of course, using his new fame, Al Capone did his best to support Colbert as they made their way to the Signy continent in order to build the foundation for Zion's arrival after his return from Solterra. Always listen to Father, Mother, Mikhail, Shasha, and Remy while I'm away, okay? 13 said to Rhea. Yes. Rhea nodded while looking at the sunset with her brother. Wada, return soon? I'll return as soon as I can, 13 replied. A moment later, a few others joined him on the roof. It's a good view, Erica said as she stood beside Zion. It's the second to the last sunset we're seeing before we leave this world. Right, Shauna? Yes, Shauna replied. I hope tomorrow's sunset will just be as beautiful. Have the two of you already prepared your speech for tomorrow? 13 asked. It must be inspiring, okay? We need to give the first-timers some motivation. I already memorized my speech, Erica stated. Same, Shauna nodded. But will our words really be enough? Of course, 13 said. People look up to the hero party, so hearing their speech will definitely encourage them to do their best. Also, the two of you are beautiful girls. I bet the guys will really enjoy hearing the two of you talk. Well, you're not wrong. Erica twirled her hair with her fingers. However, being weak to compliments, she couldn't stop herself from smiling because Zion called her beautiful. There was also a faint smile on Shauna's lips, which she herself hadn't noticed. She had always received compliments wherever she went. However, she knew that those were just flattery. But it hit differently when someone she respected, like Zion, complimented her. It felt more genuine compared to most. Shauna, Erica, make sure to survive, okay? 13 said as he looked at the dimming light on the horizon. I know that both of you are stronger now, but don't be too overconfident of your strength. You don't need to worry about me, Erica replied. I'm more worried about you. You're just a rookie, so you might accidentally. The young lady was about to say accidentally die in a ditch somewhere, but seeing Rhea sitting on Zion's lap, she decided that it would not be wise to continue, so she changed it to something else. You might accidentally fall into a honey trap. Be careful, okay? Me? Fall into a honey trap? Impossible. Erica giggled because she also couldn't imagine a teenage boy falling into a honey trap. She was a very beautiful girl, and not any less inferior to Shauna's beauty. And yet, when Zion looked at her, she could tell that his eyes didn't hold any interest. In fact, she felt as if the teenage boy was treating her like a little sister of sorts despite her being older than him by 4 years. It wasn't only her who felt this way. After they left the Leventis residence, Rihanna added the girls to her girl group chat, where they talked about anything under the sun. One of their discussions was about Zion treating them as if they were younger than him. After finding out that others were feeling the same thing as her, their discussion went on for hours, with them ranting about Zion not handling beautiful girls like them in a delicate manner. Mildred complained that no boys tried to hit her, but Zion did, not using words or his hands, but with baseballs during their training. Rihanna, who also suffered a similar treatment, joined Mildred in her rant, which made things very lively. However, Viola and the two other Valkyries, Sharon and Louise, told them that compared to the training they had under Zion, what the hero party and Rihanna undertook was child's play. He even went as far as touching my body, Viola said with a blush. Right. He made sure to inject us with his fluids every day, Sharon stated. It was so hot, and I felt like I was burning from the inside out. Sometimes, he would do that more than 4 times a day. Louise nodded. My body would be so sore every time we finish our session. On certain days, he would do it with the 3 of us at the same time. Zion can be overbearing at times. The faces of Rihanna and the girls of the hero party all became beet red after hearing the scandalous and misleading statements that the 3 Valkyries made. Rihanna even protested that they were just making it up, but Viola only laughed and told her that maybe her favorability wasn't that high enough for Zion to personally inject his fluids inside Rihanna's body. Naturally, Shauna demanded that Viola and her sisters explain what happened properly, but the 3 Valkyries only laughed and told them that they were still too young to know such details. Having remembered those talks, Erica cleared her throat and decided to ask 13 question. Zion, Viola told me that you injected your fluids in her body, Erica said. Sharon and Louise also admitted that you did that to them as well. Is that true? They told you that? 13 turned her head to look at Erica. I explicitly told them not to tell others about it. I'm going to punish them later. So it's true then? Shauna asked, her voice turning icy. Did you really inject them with your fluids? I did, 13 replied. There were times when I injected the 3 of them at the same time with my fluids. Fortunately, they are highly compatible with it, and it made them stronger as well. That special serum was something that would allow them to resist Evavug's mind control, so I had to make sure they took it properly. Without it, the brain beetle would have turned them into slaves, you know? Erica and Shauna quietly glanced at each other before leaving the rooftop at the same time. They were going to look for Viola, Sharon, and Louise. This time, they would make sure that the 3 properly explained the fluids Zion had injected into them, which made them stronger. Every year, the Night of the Fireflies would be held in an open field that belonged to the Remington clan. They had even built a stage for it because it had become a yearly tradition. However, today was the night of the solstice, and it was only an hour away from midnight. Once the clock struck midnight, everyone deemed to have met the requirements to go to Solterra would be sent back to that world, including the wanderers who would experience their first wandering. To them, this night was a very significant moment in their life, because they didn't know if they would live long enough to see the sunrise after being sent to Solterra. Although today wasn't the Night of the Fireflies yet, the venue was already packed to the brim with people. The majority of them were wanderers who would be returning to Solterra in less than an hour. 13 had made an announcement. On the night of the solstice, the hero party in Zion Levinas would be giving them an encouraging speech so that everyone would be filled with courage on their wanderings. People around the world who were also spending their last moments with their loved ones looked at the TV with anticipation. Soon, the lights on the stage lit up one by one, and the members of the hero party appeared in front of everyone. A resounding cheer spread in the surroundings the moment the wanderers saw their idols. The 7 members of the hero party consisted of handsome gentlemen and beautiful ladies. So seeing them together made a lasting impression on the people who saw them up close in real life. Friends and fellow wanderers, tonight we will once again continue our journeys, Roland said as he held a microphone in his hand. Although it will be difficult, I believe that all of us have what it takes to reach our destination. He then passed the microphone to Erica, who was standing beside him. No matter where we are, we'll always share the same sky. Erica smiled as she said the things that she had prepared for tonight's speech. When I first experienced my first wandering, I felt afraid. Everything was a new experience for me. I'm sure that those who have experienced their first wandering understand what I am talking about. To you, who will be experiencing it for the first time, understand what I'm talking about. You'll never realize how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have. So raise your heads and take that first step. You will eventually reach your destination, for that is what wandering is all about. Although Erica had memorized this speech and practiced it over and over again, saying it in front of so many people while knowing that it was being broadcast all over the world made her feel more emotional than she expected. She even felt like crying because she remembered the time when she was first sent to Solterra. It had been a very difficult time for her, but she managed to survive it by using everything she had. Before a tear could fall from her eyes, she hurriedly passed the microphone to Joshua, which made the camera zoom in his direction. Thanks to that, others did not see Erica silently wipe the tears in her eyes. I consider myself very lucky because I was born in a family that allowed me to prepare for my first journey to Solterra, Joshua stated. I am one of the people whom you refer to as the Blessed Ones. I also thought that way when I was sent to a world filled with danger, not knowing if I would be able to survive the night. But during my journeys, I have met many people who weren't as blessed as I am. They weren't born as the chosen ones who grew up with a silver spoon in their mouths. Even so, these people taught me lessons that I never learned during my training. In that world, it is not the strongest nor the most intelligent, but those who are able to adapt to their surroundings who thrive, excel, and achieve great results. The one doesn't care about our backgrounds or who we are. In his eyes, we are one and the same. So do your best to survive. As long as you do, you will see the world in a new perspective, and by then, you will gain the power to protect the people you care for the most. Joshua then handed the microphone to Derek, who made his speech next. All the members of the hero party did their best to encourage everyone and make them think of becoming a wanderer as an opportunity instead of a burden. Finally, it was Shauna's turn to give her speech. I used to fear this time of the year because during this time, I will have to leave my loved ones behind, Shauna said softly. Her calm and soothing voice reached everyone's ears, making them pay close attention to her. My friends have already said most of what I wanted to tell everyone, so let me just add a few words of my own. Shauna paused for a bit before scanning the faces of everyone who had gathered in front of her. Not every path is straight, nor every journey swift, Shauna said with a smile. Not all who wander are lost. Some are simply discovering paths that others have yet to tread. I know someone who was sent to Solterra when he was 7 years old, a child who is not old enough to be considered a teenager. And yet, he wandered across that world and came back safely after years of wandering. There's no need to rush your journey. All that matters is for you to return to those who are waiting for you back home. Shauna's words hit harder than most because there were many who spent years in Solterra before being able to go back home. A moment later, the hero party parted, and a teenage boy whom everyone recognized appeared. A resounding cheer, much stronger than what the hero party had received, reverberated across the venue. Some even cheered from their own homes as they looked at Zion Leventis, whom many idolized. He was also the person whom Shauna had been talking about earlier, and many were inspired by his life story. Shauna handed the microphone to Zion's hands, and the latter thanked her for it. 13 then faced the crowd and smiled with confidence. Wanderers, tonight is the night where we will once again journey into the world of Solterra, 13 said in a light-hearted tone. Are you all excited? To be honest, I am very excited. After all, a new adventure awaits. Some of the wanderers chuckled because of 13's casual way of telling them that everything was going to be fine. 13 also chuckled, making the tension in the surroundings become lighter. The heroes of old, those who forged legends and shaped destinies, did not follow a straight path, 13 said. They ventured into the unknown, faced their fears, and found their way. They didn't achieve that by avoiding challenges, but by embracing them. Each twist and turn of their journey brought them closer to their true selves and their greatest triumphs. You look at the hero party and think of them as heroes. To that, I agree. They are indeed heroes. But all of you gathered here, and those who are watching from home, are also heroes. It takes great courage to venture into that world. Not all who wander are lost. It is very normal to fear the unknown. I was first sent to that world when I was 7 years old. But here I am, standing before you today, alive and well. If I can do it, I'm sure that all of you can do it too. The countdown clock above the stage was starting to count down to the last minute until midnight finally struck. 13, knowing that he only had a few words to say, smiled faintly. Everyone, let us all meet in that world once more, 13 stated. Tell your family and friends that you will see them soon, rather than goodbye, for we will definitely meet them again after our mission is over. Last but not the least, I want all of you to remember. 13's body started to glow faintly as the final seconds of the countdown neared midnight. In times of darkness, one must stop looking for the light and become the glow for others to follow. One by one, the wanderers glowed faintly, illuminating the darkness of the night. Particles of light escaped their bodies, a sign that they were about to be sent to that world. Shauna and Erica suddenly moved and held on to 13's arm. Be careful, Shauna said softly. Come back safely. There are many who will wait for your return. Pray to Lady Luck that you encounter me in Solterra, Erica stated. I will give you a free ride on your mission. You can thank me later. 13 smiled and nodded his head. Let us meet again under the same sky. The teenage boy's words rang out of the venue as everyone turned into particles of light, shooting up to the heavens like countless pillars that held up the night sky. all over the world, the Wanderers were once again returning to Solterra, and with it, they would be facing new challenges that would test their will to survive. When 13 regained his senses, he found himself standing on top of a hill, welcomed by the sight of a tranquil valley in the distance. It didn't take long for him to realize that he wasn't alone. Right below the hill he was standing on were dozens of teenagers who were the same age as him. These teenagers looked at their surroundings, as well as the other people around them, in surprise. Half a minute later, one of them looked up. Seeing 13 above them, he shouted in surprise, "Zion Leventis!" At the boy's shout, the other teenagers all looked in the direction the boy was looking at. At that moment, 13 saw various expressions on their faces. Surprise, excitement, relief, rivalry. There were many other emotions, and seeing them made him sigh in his heart. There are at least 50 of them, 13 thought. This is an ominous sign. There was a general rule when wanderers were sent to Solterra. The more wanderers summoned in one place, the harder their mission would be. Among the 50 teenagers, there were a handful of individuals who seemed to understand their current situation. But after seeing Zion, they felt relief, knowing that someone capable was sent there alongside them. "Is this your first wandering?" 13 asked to confirm his suspicion. "Yes, it is, Sir Zion. I am a huge fan." Most of the other wanderers replied something similar, making 13 sigh in his heart. "Understood," 13 nodded. "Everyone, please check your missions first. Let's see if we all have the same mission." After instructing them, 13 opened his status page and checked the notification blinking on it. Trial of Courage, Part 1. This mission is a chain quest. In order to clear it, you will need to clear 3 missions first. Find a stronghold of Wimpolies located on the west of the land called Fractured Heaven, and overthrow the tyrant ruling it. Time limit, none. The moment 13 saw the words Fractured Heaven, he immediately accessed his soul core for information. A bountiful land ravaged by a great war hundreds of years ago. Ancient battlefields can still be found in this land, so it may be a good place to look for weapons and artifacts. It borders the Great Wall, which blocks the horrors that wish to invade the Fractured Heaven. Note, make sure to hide at night, because swarms of rank 1 dark bats are very common in this area. A chain quest. 13 thought, this is not going to be easy. After reading what his quest was about, he once again looked at the wanderers and saw them staring at him with hopeful gazes. Since it was their first time in Solterra, the majority of them wished for someone to lead them. Among everyone present, Zion was naturally the best candidate. Aside from being the only ranked wanderer in their group, he also had experience commanding the army. For them, being on the same team as Zion was too good to be true. Zion Leventis. I am Heidi Latte from the Latte family. A pretty teenage girl who had shoulder-length brown hair that ended up in curls stepped forward. Seeing that fate had arranged for us to wander together, how about we discuss a beneficial method of cooperation? Straightforward as always, Heidi, a teenage boy with blonde hair and blue eyes, commented. However, I can understand. Seeing Zion Leventis with us makes me feel safer. Oh, where are my manners? The name is Leon Gates. Leon gave Zion a carefree wave, making the teenage boy nod his head to acknowledge his presence. Since Heidi and Leon have already introduced themselves, allow me to introduce myself as well. A teenage girl with long black hair and brown eyes said with a smile. Natalie Bishop. Let's all get along. The young lady had a sharp gaze that intimidated the other wanderers who were standing close to her. A moment later, a teenage boy with red hair took a few steps forward, advancing ahead of the others who had introduced themselves earlier. Sean Griffin. Pleasure to meet you, Sean said as he gazed at the young man, standing on top of the hill with determination. A glance was enough that he was treating Zion as a rival whom he wanted to surpass. 13 looked at the 3 teenagers who were members of the 3 prestigious families, then shifted his gaze to Sean, who was a member of a monarch clan. All 4 of them were from the Signy continent, which was about to face the Jinn invasion. It's nice to meet all of you, 13 said. Tell me, is your mission also about the trial of courage? The 4 teenagers nodded their heads in affirmation. Is it the same for the rest of you? 13 glanced at the other wanderers. Yes. Hearing their positive reply, 13 nodded and gave an order. I don't know if any of you wish to become part of my team, but for those who do, please stand on the left side, 13 stated, pointing his hand on the left side of the hill. Those who don't want to become part of my team, just stay where you are. The majority of the wanderers didn't even think and immediately moved to the area Zion was pointing at. The majority of them just wanted to survive, so going with Zion was their best option. However, the 4 scions from the Cygni continent remained in their place, alongside their retainers who were also sent to the same place as them. Over 30 people wished to become part of Zion's team, while 16 people remained standing on his right side. 13 didn't mind this development. He knew that the teenagers from the prestigious families, as well as the monarch clans, had their pride and were, as expected, unwilling to become the subordinates of others. I hope that even if we're not on the same team, we won't interfere with each other's survival, 13 said as he looked at Sean, who seemed to be the temporary leader of the Cygni faction. This land is very dangerous, and the last thing we want is an internal conflict. Can I count on you guys to uphold this agreement? Sean nodded. I accept this condition. Even if they weren't on the same team, as long as one of them was able to complete the mission, everyone would be able to complete it. Because of this, there was no need to force each other to work together on the same team. After bidding their goodbyes to each other and parting ways, 13 faced the 34 teenagers who were looking at him with anticipation and smiled faintly. Okay, first things first. Who among you have received training to fight? 13 asked. Please raise your right hand. Among the 34 wanderers, only 6 people raised their hands. Good. All of you go to my right side. 13 pointed to his right, and the 6 excited wanderers didn't hesitate to stand beside him. Now, who among you have received survival training? 13 inquired. Who among you knows how to cook? 13 asked more questions, dividing the wanderers into separate groups. After a series of questions, 10 people remained in their spots. 13 labeled them as complete civilians who didn't receive any martial art or survival training. He didn't plan to give them a free ride. Doing so would hurt their growth in the future. With this in mind, he assigned every group a task according to what they could do. As for the 10 people, he planned to have them assist everyone and shift around the other groups, except the hunting team who received proper martial arts training. The wanderers, who now had a sense of purpose, were feeling excited. They had seen how Zion Leventis commanded the allied armies and believed that as long as they followed his orders, they would be able to survive their first wandering without fail. Seeing their hopeful gazes, 13 smiled back at them to give them some encouragement. All right, now that it's settled, let's all start preparing for our journey to the west, 13 said. He then reached out to his dimensional storage and took out a few things. Among them were axes, short swords, spears, bows, and arrows. The hunting team happily took the weapons they were proficient in, feeling more confident about surviving. Let's go to the valley first and look for a cave or anywhere suitable to settle in for the night, 13 stated. We will only leave this place once we have stocked up enough food and other essentials for our journey. Our mission has no time limit, so let us proceed slowly but safely. Survival is always the top priority, so just follow my orders and make sure that you don't wander alone on your own. Do I make myself clear? Yes, sir. 13 chuckled, seeing the teenagers were acting like soldiers. There were even some who threw him a playful salute. He saluted them back and took the lead to start their hunt. Tiona, who was coiled up on 13's neck, summoned her clone and asked it to scout the surroundings for monsters to ensure their group wouldn't encounter anything dangerous in the valley. The last thing 13 wanted to happen was to have casualties on their first day, which would definitely lower the morale of his team, potentially leading to consequences that he wanted to avoid at all costs. He was confident that he could train them to become a competent party as long as he was given enough time to do it. Meanwhile, the members of the Cygni faction were also headed toward the valley to also hunt for monsters. It would have been better if we joined them, Heidi commented as she walked beside her retainers. My parents told me that I should form a good relationship with Zion if I meet him here in Solterra. We are all headed to the same destination, so there is plenty of time to do that, Sean replied. Besides, I don't like working with a big group. Just say you don't want to carry extra baggage, Elyon commented. I checked them out earlier, and only a few of them looked somehow competent. The rest are just ordinary people. Well, if they survive until we arrive at the stronghold of Wind Police, I'll change my impression of them, Natalie stated. But until then, I'm siding with Sean on this one. I don't like carrying extra baggage. Heidi giggled because she also felt that way. In fact, it was very shameful if any member of the prestigious families and the monarch clans failed to survive their first wandering. That's why all of them were trained at a very young age to excel and survive in Solterra. That said, they believed that their team was enough to handle most threats, so they decided to separate from Zion's team. Even so, we need to acquire weapons as soon as possible, Elyon stated. I hope we find some weak rank 1 monsters so we can farm them for equipment. The group nodded their heads in agreement. Even if they were trained, their training would be useless if they didn't have any weapons. Looks like their team is finally moving, Natalie commented as she glanced in the direction of Zion's team, which was also headed to the valley. Sean threw Zion's group a sidelong glance before shifting his gaze back to the path in front of him. As a scion of the Griffin clan, he knew how much their patriarch valued Zion Leventis. He even ordered all of them to treat him with respect and assist him in every way if they were to meet in Solterra. Sean also had a good impression of Zion, but seeing that they were of the same age, a sense of rivalry burned in his heart. He believed that if given the chance, he would also be able to show his own strength and make his name among the next batch of rookies. While he admitted that the supreme commander of the Alliance was a better leader than him, he wanted to try leading his own team as well. If it didn't really work out, he could always reach out to Zion once they traveled west to look for the Wimpole stronghold. Suddenly, the group encountered their first monster, which happened to be a rank 1 boar. Instead of being afraid, the Signy faction became excited. Not only did a low-ranking monster approach them first, but there was also a chance to gain something from killing it. Although they didn't have any weapons, they were confident that if they all worked together, it was only a matter of time before they were able to bring down the threat in front of them. Meanwhile, it was not only the Signy faction that encountered their first monsters. Zion's team was also faced with 4 wolves, who thought that the children were easy pickings. But unlike the Signy faction who didn't have any weapons, 13's team was sufficiently armed to handle the wolves. A few minutes later, 4 dead wolves lay on the ground, increasing the morale of the Wanderers, especially the ones who had managed to get their first kills, as well as their first items, on their first day in Solterra. 2 weeks had passed since 13 had been sent to Solterra and arrived at the place called Fractured Heaven. The number of Wanderers that were currently in the valley numbered 50 and was divided into 2 factions, Zion's faction and the Signy faction. The 2 groups steered clear of each other's side of the valley and did their best to not antagonize each other. However, this was only possible because Zion was leading the first group of Wanderers. If it were anyone else, Sean and the members of his faction wouldn't have qualms about using force to make all the other Wanderers submit to them. "Boss, those guys have come again," a pretty teenage girl named Sherry said as she entered the location where Zion was sleeping. She looked like a delicate-looking boy with short blonde hair and blue eyes. But in reality, she was actually a girl. Although both of her parents loved her very much, her father would sometimes say that he wished he had a son to take over their business, implying that Sherry was not suitable to become the leader of a mercenary group. Unfortunately, after going through hard labor to give birth to Sherry, her mother was no longer capable of birthing another child. Because of this, Sherry did her best to become the son that her father always wanted. Under her delicate exterior was a battle-hardened teenage girl. The palms of her hands weren't soft like the daughters of wealthy families. It was hard and had calluses from wielding short swords since she started her training. This was why those who mistake her as a delicate and soft lady due to her appearance would often find themselves on the opposite end of her blade. The Wanderers in Zion's group learned this the hard way when they tried to flirt with her, thinking that she was a delicate flower. When 13 asked who among the Wanderers was capable of fighting, she didn't raise her hands because she wanted to better understand 13's leadership abilities. She had read stories and news articles and had watched his battle in the Rigel continent. But she didn't always trust what was shown by the media. Even as a teenage girl, She believed that everyone had two faces, a face they showed to the public, and another face that they showed whenever no one was looking. She had wanted to unmask the real Zion, so she pretended to be one of the 10 useless wanderers who didn't have any specialties whatsoever. It was also because of this that a few of the wanderers thought that she was looking for someone to depend on, and they were more than happy to flirt with her. Naturally, Sherry asked them to stop politely and told them that she wasn't interested. Of course, the boys, thinking that she was only playing hard to get, didn't back down and continued to get on her nerves. Although they were just 13-year-old teenagers, the people of Pangea and the mentality of the children of Pangea matured faster due to the dangers that they had to face during the Jinn invasions. It was perfectly normal for teenagers to develop a crush on the people who were sent to Solterra alongside them. In fact, most couples would start this way, similar to what happened to Gerald and Alessia during their first wandering. The Wanderers even had a term for this: love at first fight. Unfortunately, the happy endings that the teenage boys thought would happen didn't happen. The only thing they got was a one-sided beating from the delicate-looking tomboy who was stronger than she looked. Seeing that their boss was still asleep, Sherry crouched down and lightly shook his body. Tiona glanced at the teenage girl, but didn't make any move to attack her. Right now, Sherry was 13's right-hand man. After learning about her background, he decided that since she wished to become the leader of a mercenary group in the future, starting her training with the wanderers of his group was a good opportunity for her. Because of this, he had assigned her the task of assisting him in handling the affairs of their party, which was given the name Little Rascals. Of course, the Wanderers didn't like this name, so 13 compromised and simply called them Rascals. Many were still unwilling to have such a name, but their boss gave them a choice. Either they let themselves be called Rascals or My Little Ponies. Naturally, they chose the lesser evil, and from here on, the Rascal Wandering Party was born. Boss, wake up. Sherry shook 13 a little harder. If you don't wake up, they might steal one of the wagons we've been building for our trip. The teenage boy finally opened his eyes and looked at the pretty girl who had a frown on her face. You should have told them to scram, Sherry, 13 replied before slowly propping himself up on his makeshift bed. You know I can't do that, Sherry stated. They won't listen to me, plus they have more capable fighters than us. If I really told them anything similar to that, they might use it as an excuse to attack our members. You're the only deterrent who can make them stay their hand, boss. 13 listened while doing some light stretches. I'll handle this for now, but in the future, you better man up and do it yourself, okay? 13 said after he was done with his stretching. The more you bend to their will, the more they will push their weight around. That's easy for you to say, boss. Sherry smiled bitterly. I'm not a member of a prestigious family like you. Then do better in your next life, okay? 13 chuckled before lightly patting her shoulder. Let's go. The teenage boy then walked toward the entrance of the cave. Sherry followed behind him and didn't think much of what her boss said earlier. She might be the second strongest wanderer in Zion's party, but compared to the signs of the monarch clans and prestigious families, her fighting prowess was only average at best. When 13 stepped out of the cave, he could already feel the tension between his group and the Signy faction's group. Fortunately, they were still in a standoff. At least they still knew that a fight would not benefit either group. Seeing their boss appear, the Rascals breathed a sigh of relief in their hearts. 13 might look like a harmless teenager, but they had seen firsthand how he single-handedly wiped the floor with one of Sean's retainers who thought that he could get away with harassing his members. So what's up? 13 asked. You guys disturbed my beauty sleep. Sean looked long and hard at Zion before saying the reason why he came. We would like to trade for 3 of your wagons, Sean declared. We will give you proper compensation. 13 tilted his head to the side and glanced at the wooden wagons that his party had built since they arrived in Solterra. They had just finished building their 3rd wagon yesterday, and now Sean and his faction wanted to take them all so that they could start their journey toward the stronghold of Wempeles. They're not for trade, 13 replied. If you want wagons, you can build ones yourselves. I could trade for nails, wood shaving tools, and hammers. I can even teach you how it's done, but the wagons here belong to our group. The Rascals, who heard their boss reply, all nodded their heads in agreement. They had worked hard to build their wagons, so they wouldn't allow anyone to take them so easily. Sean eyed Zion and pondered for a while. He was half tempted to just take the wagons by force. However, there was one problem. Zion was a rookie, while they were all rankless. There was also the matter of him being the commander of the Alliance. They still needed his help when it was the Signy continent's turn to fight against the Jinn invasion. For short, they couldn't afford to antagonize him, even if they wanted to. Fine, Sean replied. Nails, hammers, and the knowledge on how to build them. Good. 13 nodded. In return, you will help my party kill beasts and give them the last hit. Let's see if the dozen dark bison will be good. Dark bisons were one of the common monsters that could be found in the valley they were currently at. They range anywhere from rank 1 and rank 2 monsters. Although it would take time to hunt those who weren't part of a herd, they could still be killed by the members of the Signy faction, especially since they already gained a few items during the past 2 weeks. Even so, they were still dissatisfied with this arrangement because they believed that Zion was taking advantage of them. A dozen dark bisons for nails, hammers, and the knowledge to make a wagon. Leggins scratched his head. Isn't that too much compensation? Really? 13 arched an eyebrow. I think I'm the one who's at a disadvantage here. Did you think you could just pick up nails on the ground? Sure, you can use stone and bones as a hammer, but you won't be able to find nails and wood shaving tools anywhere. They might be dirt cheap in Pangea, but here, they are luxury items. So I don't think I'm asking for too much. It's a fair trade, don't you think? Of course, if you don't like it, we can always rumble. I'm also quite annoyed because my beauty sleep is disturbed. Sean and Elyon were about to argue, but a giggle stopped them in their tracks. We're sorry we disturbed your beauty sleep, Heidi said. Boys don't understand it, but girls do. Very well, we agree to this condition. Sean and Elyon both frowned, but in the end, they didn't say anything else. Great. 13 nodded. Now that we have an understanding, Sherry, you go and take Team 5 and Team 6 to hunt some bison with our friends here. All of them only take one chance to kill a monster. Whether they can get an item or not from their kills, they won't get a second chance. Come back as soon as you can, okay? Sherry reluctantly nodded her head and gestured at the 2 teams to follow her. To be honest, she was feeling a little anxious about bringing the 2 teams Zion mentioned with the Signy faction. Those 2 teams didn't specialize in combat and merely played a supporting role. Because of this, none of them had even a single item that could be obtained from monsters. Hearing that their chance to get freebies had come, the 2 teams gave their boss a thumbs up in their hearts. I have a question. As you know, this valley is a dangerous place, and we can't always guarantee that your members will not get injured, Elyon said in a meaningful tone. Dark bisons are strong, and if we happen to find a group with a rank 3 alpha monster guarding them, there's a chance that people might get hurt, or worse, die in the process. So, will you hold us accountable if something happens to your people? 13 pondered for a bit before shaking his head. I won't hold you liable, 13 replied. This valley is indeed a very dangerous place, so people could die anytime. Elyon smiled faintly, because he had a few ideas of his own on how to teach the people who would be coming with him a lesson they would never forget. However, 13's next words made the smile on his face stiffen. Since this is a very dangerous place, there's also a chance that you guys can also die anytime, 13 said with a mischievous smile on his face. It can't be helped, you know? After all, we are in Solterra. In this place, if we die, we only have ourselves to blame, right? 13 said it in a playful tone, but his message was crystal clear. If you kill my people, you die. If you die, you only have yourself to blame, right? Elyon gritted his teeth before forcefully averting his gaze. Zion's gaze was like that of a tiger that had marked its prey. If a fight really broke out between their party and the Signy faction, both sides would suffer casualties. This was the worst-case scenario that could happen, so their faction didn't go out of their way to antagonize Zion's party. However, when they discovered that they were building wagons for their journey, they realized that they didn't have the ability to build them themselves. Although they had no idea how Zion managed to procure tools like hammers, shaving tools, and nails, they understood that they would need a mode of transport for the journey to their destination. Even if they managed to secure avatars that could make traveling easier, having a wagon to serve as a shelter to the elements, as well as store their items and other provisions for their journey, would help them greatly. Of course, they couldn't just take it by force because they were told by their families to not antagonize Zion Levinus. So they decided to trade with him in order to get their own wagons. Unfortunately, Zion had no intention of trading the wagons that his members had built. If he agreed, his members would lose motivation, and it would also lower their morale, which he didn't want to happen. Also, he wanted to teach the Signy faction a lesson. Their mentality was the common mentality of those who belong to the monarch clans and 10 prestigious families. They expect that everyone would cater to their needs just because of their family's prestige. Of course, since Zion was from the Levinus family, he was immune to their bullying and harassment. But not everyone was like him. Even Sherry, who was born into a well-off family, didn't dare to talk back to Sean and his cohorts because she understood the implications of doing so. Even if she managed to get away with it in Solterra, her family would definitely suffer in Pangea. Right now, the rascals could only depend on Zion's prestige to make sure that they wouldn't get bullied by the monarch clans and the prestigious families. The hierarchy of wanderers had been set from the very start, so those at the bottom could only endure and bow their heads to those who were on top. With this problem in mind, 13 had a plan. Since he couldn't change the current hierarchy of the world, he would first start with the scions of the Signy faction. He would make them a little more human by making them realize that even with their family's backing, there were times when finding a more peaceful way of settling things would benefit more people in the long run. Since they were sharing the same mission, it was guaranteed that all of them would be heading west to reach the stronghold of Wempeles. At least, until their missions were over, 13 wanted the rascals to be recognized by the Signy faction, not because he was leading them, but because they were competent enough to survive. The teenage boy watched as Sherry and her team disappeared in the distance, then made a gesture for his party to resume what they were doing. He then walked toward the cave, and once he was inside, he lightly tapped his right foot on the ground. "Rocky, babysit Sherry and the others," 13 ordered. "If any rank 3 monster or higher were to attack them, you know what to do." The Magma Balboa obeyed its master's order and began to travel under the ground to catch up to Sherry's team. What Elyon said earlier was right. Variables could happen on the battlefield, and if a monster that was too dangerous for them to handle were to appear, casualties might happen. Naturally, the members of the Signy faction would prioritize saving themselves and would leave Sherry's team behind. To prevent the worst-case scenario from happening, they needed a bodyguard, and Rocky fit that job perfectly. "Tiona, have you found IT?" 13 asked. Tiona nodded and hissed a few times. Certain places in Solterra, like forests, swamps, plains, and valleys, all had one thing in common. They usually had a field-type monster like an overlord or a world boss like a sovereign. 13 had asked Tiona to find the locations of these monsters so that they could be monitored. Any of those 2 monsters was enough to kill all the 50 wanderers that were currently in the valley, with the exception of 13. Because of this, Tiona and some of the few members of the parade of the 100 demons were paying attention to them. They would immediately report if these powerful monsters were to head in their location. Truth be told, 13 really didn't care whether these monsters were to head in their direction or not. With the forces at his disposal, even a rank 7 monster was not a problem. However, he didn't want to depend on Rocky and the others too much. 13 didn't want his skills and battle prowess to become dull, especially after hearing the vision of Tyga's sister, Cleo. Since he was going to fight against a strong opponent, he had to hone himself in fighting actual battles, putting his life on the line in order to get a higher chance of defeating one of the beings whom he hated the most. As a child who was born to one of the prestigious families, Elyon had always thought that he was one of the chosen ones. He had the best lineage, the best upbringing, and commanded respect from those who didn't belong to the monarch clans and prestigious families. Simply put, people had to think twice before they messed with him. He was a very ambitious person, and he believed that he was better than his peers, including Sean, a descendant from the Griffin clan. Because he was from the monarch clan, his position was slightly higher than Elyon. And frankly, Elyon didn't really like it. He believed that he was much better than Sean in every aspect. Whether it be fighting, survival, and leading a team, he believed that he surpassed the monarch's descendant in every aspect. The other children who hailed from the Signy faction were also nothing to him. However, he had no choice but to follow Sean for the time being, lest it disrupted their unity against someone who was deemed untouchable. Zion Leventis, a rookie who had created many unbelievable feats, including fighting against a Magian prince and living to tell the tale. Of course, like many people, Leon didn't believe that hogwash. He believed that it was just propaganda made by the Leventis family and the central government to make them look good. However, after Zion led the alliance and secured the northern regions of the Rigel continent, most people were convinced that maybe those unbelievable stories about the supreme commander of the alliance were real. Even Zion's staunchest critics had to shut their trap after he attained the impossible. And what was that impossible feat? It was regaining a quarter of the Rigel continent from the Jinns, who everyone thought was invincible. I hate this, Leon thought as he looked at Sherry, who was leading the 12 Wanderers who only played support roles in Zion's team. They were the ones who did the miscellaneous jobs like cooking, gathering firewood, and building the wagons. In Leon's eyes, they were nothing but extra baggage. They were just servants, porters, and cannon fodders. And yet, he was forced to spoon-feed these cannon fodders with last-hit kills in order to secure the deal with Zion Leventis so that they could build their own wagons. Damn it! Leon cursed internally as he faced the dark bison that was lured in his direction by his subordinates. With one swift sword strike, Leon cut off one of the monster's legs, making it skid on the ground. His other subordinates then hacked the other legs in order to ensure that even someone who didn't have any experience in fighting a monster could kill it easily. "What are you waiting for?" Leon asked in disdain. "Kill it. Do as he says," Sherry said as he chose one of the Wanderers to kill the dark bison. "Just slash its neck. Even if you don't manage to cut it off the first time, just keep hacking." The teenage girl bit her lip while holding the sword in her hand. With a shout, she slashed down her sword and hit the neck of the dark bison. Even when she gave it her all, the blow was not strong enough. However, it still drew blood, which sprayed in her direction, making her scream in fright. Leon had the strong urge to slap her, not liking how she was making a big deal out of nothing. They had already ensured her safety, so why couldn't she even do her job properly? This is why I hate these commoners. Leon spat on the ground in order to vent his frustration. Filthy leeches. Sherry consoled the girl and asked her to try again. The girl nodded and hacked the bison repeatedly, hitting it in different directions, making blood splatter everywhere. The members of the Signy faction watched this scene with frowns. The girl was just randomly slashing with tears and snot streaming down her face. "Kill it already. We don't have all day," Leon growled, making the girl cry out in shock and dropping the sword in her hand out of fright. Fortunately, the dark bison seemed to have reached its limit and died from blood loss. Sherry took the crying girl to the side and tried to calm her down. "Go lure another dark bison," Sean ordered his subordinates, who obeyed his command without fail. Just like Leon, he was also feeling annoyed due to how helpless the Wanderers of the other party were. He thought that maybe Zion only took them under his wing because he needed servants to do the menial tasks for him. However, Zion would always lead them by example. When making the wagons, he was there to show them how it should be done. He helped them shave the logs. He helped them hammer the nails. He helped them hunt monsters and even gave them tips on how to kill them more effectively. Last but not the least, he was also teaching them how to fight. Of course, not everyone, just like the girl earlier, was able to learn quickly. Even so, 13 was willing to teach them everything they needed to know on how to survive in Solterra. Fortunately, they finished their compensation just before lunch, so they all made their way back to Zion's camp in time for a meal. The dark bisons were very heavy, so they only carried one of them back and left the rest behind. For the Signy faction, the only good thing from the bisons were their cores. Its meat, while edible, wasn't really something that they liked to dine on. Only the members of Zion's team wanted to take one back with them, so they tied it with a rope and pulled it all the way to their base camp. "Well done," 13 said to his team members, who had returned safely. Just as promised, I will provide you with the items you need to make your own wagons. I'll even throw in 3 axes as a freebie. 13 took out the items from his dimensional storage and presented it to Sean. I'm sure all of you are hungry, so have lunch with us first, 13 added. We have beef stew, so eat till you're here. But before the teenage boy could finish his sentence, Sherry stepped forward and asked him a question. Boss, are you the one who cooked it? Sherry asked with a serious expression on her face. I wanted to, but you guys banned me from cooking, 13 replied with a frown. I could have made it more nutritious and packed with vitamins and nutrients. But you're the ones who don't want me anywhere near the cooking pots. Sherry breathed a sigh of relief in her heart because a disaster was avoided. During the first day that they arrived in Solterra, 13 volunteered to cook a meal for them, making them all feel happy and excited. It had been a while since then, but they still didn't understand how a simple barbecued meat could taste like bubblegum. In fact, anything that their boss cooked would miraculously taste like bubblegum despite using no spices at all. Since then, for the sake of their stomach and mental health, they decided that they would be the one to handle cooking duties. Oh, I'd love to eat something that Sir Zion cooked. Heidi, who wanted to form a closer connection with Zion, said with a smile. I'm sure that it will be a memorable experience. The members of Zion's party looked at the pretty girl with pity. If she only knew what she was signing herself into, she would definitely regret her decision. Finally, a person of culture, 13 smiled. Sure, I'll cook something for you one of these days. I'll hold on to that promise, Sir Zion. Of course. Just who do you think I am? Sherry, who could no longer take this discussion, signaled for everyone to help them carry the dark bison to the place where they stored their hunted monsters. She was happy enough that things ended peacefully between their group and the Signy faction. However, she knew that it was only a matter of time before tempers rose and things escalated to something that might lead to conflicts. Of course, she had relayed these concerns to Zion, but her boss only told her that if it really came to that, she didn't have to worry about anything, because he would handle the Signy faction on his own. Truth be told, Sherry considered herself very lucky because Zion was sent to the same location as her. If not, then she and the rest of the other Wanderers might have lived a different fate under the management of the Signy faction, who looked at them as if they were insects that they could crush any time. Thrust! Thrust! The gasps of dozens of teenagers who had zero fighting experience thrusting their wooden spears forward sounded. They were the ones who were meant to die as soon as they entered the world of Solterra due to their inexperience. Fortunately, they came to the same place as Zion, who didn't treat them like cannon fodders or extras. He knew that it was impossible to train new recruits complicated fighting styles, so he decided to let them learn how to wield the spear. Sometimes, using a spear is better than using a sword because of its range. Wanderers, especially those who didn't have any fighting experience, didn't want to get up close and personal with monsters unless they had no choice but to do it. Because of this, letting them learn spearmanship was the friendliest option, allowing them to help their comrades by stabbing the monsters as a team from different directions. The god of Wanderers, the One, didn't look too kindly to those who didn't put any effort in completing their missions. They would be given very minimal rewards, which some Wanderers were fine with. In their point of view, as long as they were alive, it was enough. There is nothing wrong with this mentality because everyone wants to survive. But in the long run, they would have to face challenges that they couldn't escape from. Such was the fate of Wanderers that were forced to fight a battle that none of them had chosen. From today, Zion's party, the Rascals, would spend their days on a strict schedule. Mornings would be stamina training, including running along a designated route in the valley that was free from monsters. The reason why this path was free from monsters was thanks to Giga, Rocky, Blackie, Hercules, the trolls, and the ogres killing the monsters that could harm the children. Because of this, the path was safe to traverse. After their morning runs, they would have breakfast and work on the wagons. The hunting teams would hunt, while the workers would work. During the afternoons, they would train spearmanship and would spar under 13's tutelage, making them more used to combat. Another week had passed since the Signy faction had asked to trade for the materials they would use to build their own wagons. Currently, 13's team had 4 wagons, while the Signy faction had 1. All in all, 13 planned to create 9 wagons. 5 people would ride each wagon, and the rest would be used to carry their supplies, like food, water, and other miscellaneous items. Unlike the members of the Signy faction, 13 wasn't in a hurry to complete their first mission. The stronghold of Wimpoles was hundreds of miles away from the valley they were at, so not only would the journey be long but also dangerous. And before they go through that, 13 wanted to train the Wanderers for at least a month first to build their foundations. The rest of their training would be resumed during their journey, which would strengthen the Wanderer's mindset. Unlike him, the members of the Signy faction wanted to leave the valley as soon as possible, so they ordered their subordinates to build the wagons faster. They also understood why 13 and his subordinates were actively hunting dark bisons. Their goal was to at least get avatars so that these monsters could pull the wagons for them. The girl who had killed the first dark bison was quite lucky, having managed to get an avatar. The others only got equipment. Although that was also good, it wasn't as great as the rewards the girl received. It was not being an exaggeration to say that getting an avatar during your first wandering was a game changer. It gave you a bodyguard of sorts, which could help you fight other monsters, lessening one's burden and making battle safer. Among the 34 members of Zion's party, 4 of them managed to gain dark bison avatars. He could already consider them lucky. After all, getting an avatar was dependent on pure luck. There is no guaranteed way to get one unless you have a hidden profession like Christopher's brute tamer. After hunting monsters, the excess meat would be turned to jerky, serving as their emergency food during their journey. Imitating them, the members of the Signy faction also started storing beef jerky for their inevitable journey. After a month of preparation and training, 13 greeted the rising sun in the east with Tiona on top of a small hill. Their 12 wagons had been completed. The original plan was to only make 8 wagons, but since 10 wanderers managed to get dark bison avatars, he thought that adding a few more wouldn't be too much of a problem. Besides, he wanted a wagon for his own. That way, he could do things without others disturbing him. Everyone agreed with this setup, because they thought that they would be hunting more dark bisons to gain avatars. However, this wasn't the case. To their surprise, 13 tamed 6 rank 2 dark bisons, who would be pulling the other wagons that initially had no bisons to pull them. 2 of those dark bisons would be pulling the wagon he built for himself, which was twice as big as the other wagons of his party. Of course, these bisons weren't tamed by 13. The ones who made them see reason was Giga, Rocky, Blackie, and Hercules, with high-ranking monsters making them choose if they want to serve their master or become their food. The dark bison chose to serve, with that they'd at least get to live. Of course, there was no contract involved or beast enslavement tattoos on their foreheads. The mere thought of being eaten by 13's monster army was enough for the dark bisons to become loyal. Last but not the least, since 13 could speak any language, including those of the monsters due to his unique ability, universal language proficiency, he made a deal with the dark bisons that he would not only let them live, but let them become stronger as well. Although reluctant, they chose to trust the teenage boy who had such high-ranking monsters at his beck and call. The past month had been quite eventful for everyone. They had several dangerous encounters with wolves, bears, and other predators during the day and night. But with Zion's commands, they suffered moderate injuries at most and no casualties. Of course, if he really wished for the Wanderers to live peacefully, he could have ordered Giga and the others to eliminate the monsters attacking them. But he didn't do that. 13 needed the Wanderers to get used to being on high alert, ready to defend themselves at a moment's notice. They said that pressure could squeeze the potential out of people, and he was using that method to sharpen their senses and make them more competent. Even the girl who had cried when she killed her first dark bison was now calmer after having killed a few more monsters with the help of her team. Although in his eyes, his team was just an armed mob at best, it was still better than how they were before they started a month ago. "Boss, are we leaving today?" Sherry, who knew where to find Zion, asked as she stood behind him. "Yes," 13 replied. "We have enough food and water to last us a few days. We also brought with us firewood. It's time to set off to the Wimpoles stronghold." Sherry nodded in understanding. "Well, it seems that the Signy faction is also waiting for us to leave the valley. They have finished building their 4 wagons and have also acquired avatars that can pull them. Sean managed to get a rank 2 bear avatar, while Elyon and his subordinates got wolf avatars. Heidi and Natalie managed to get rank 2 wild horses, which they would use to pull their own wagons. Good. 13 slowly stood up and placed his hands on his waist. Tell them that we will depart after breakfast. It's now time for another adventure. Sherry looked at Zion with a faint smile on her face. The past month had certainly been an eye-opening experience for her. She had been the one managing their team, and 13 only served as a figurehead most of the time. She wasn't dense and could tell that their boss was training her on how to become a leader. Because of this, she felt that her first wandering might become a grand adventure, which she would happily share with her family who were waiting for her back home. One more thing. Sherry, there is something very important that you have to remember, Zion said as he turned to look at his right-hand woman with a smirk on his face. Feel free to use my name to settle disputes. Don't worry, you are riding the Zion Express. You're in good hands. I know, boss, Sherry nodded. I know, yes. After spending a month with Zion, Sherry understood what kind of individual he was. Arrogant, but approachable. Strict but kind. Ruthless but caring. Wise but liked to fool around. Last but not the least, she could feel with every fiber of her being that she and the other wanderers wouldn't be used as cannon fodders by this young man. He was different from how most people from the monarch clans and prestigious families treated people with lower status and rank than theirs. Hello, Sherry. Are you still there? 13 asked as he waved his hand over the teenage girl who was looking at him in a daze. Yes, I'm here, Sherry replied as she regained her composure. I was just thinking about something, boss. And that is, you're lucky to have us with you on this journey. Sherry then immediately turned around and walked away to hide her embarrassment. Of course, the one who was lucky wasn't Zion. It was them. She just didn't want to see the smug smile on his face, so she decided to tease him a bit. 13 chuckled as he watched his second-in-command walk down the hill. Did you hear her, Tiona? 13 asked as he lightly rubbed the black snake's chin. She said that I'm lucky to have them on this journey. Tiona hissed a few times before nudging Zion's cheek with her head. I can't do that, Tiona. 13 smiled. She's a good girl, so I can't just give her a good spanking to discipline her. Tiona shook her head helplessly before nudging her master's cheek, as if telling him to be strict with Sherry. But deep inside, she thought that having an interesting girl around would at least make this journey less boring for her and her master. Tiona knew that Zion only wished to make sure that the wanderers who were with him would be able to return to their loved ones in Pangea, who was constantly thinking of them and praying for their safe return. Young master, they're finally leaving, one of Sean's subordinates reported. It's about time they do. Sean nodded. Let's all go as well. Elyon, who had urged Sean to leave earlier than Zion's group, looked at their leader with a calm expression on his face. But deep inside, he was very annoyed with Sean's wishy-washy attitude. If he were the one in command, they would have already left the valley after the first 2 wagons were made. In his point of view, they already had avatars that could travel, so creating 2 more wagons was just a waste of time. He had voiced this out during one of their meetings, but Sean rebutted him, saying that having 2 more wagons for their supplies like food, water, and other miscellaneous items would make their journey easier. Elyon knew that Zion played a role in Sean's decision to add 2 more wagons for their faction. It must have happened when Sean sought out the teenage boy's opinion on things they might need in their journey. After spending 1 week in the valley, the scion of the Griffin clan had set aside his pride and had genuinely asked Zion for advice on several things. The Signy faction could have set off earlier than Zion's team, but Sean decided that it would be better for all wanderers to stick together until they reached the Wempley stronghold. Half an hour later, a caravan of wooden wagons traveled westward. Zion's wagon, which was twice as big as everyone else's, was leading in the front. It was being pulled by 2 dark bisons that were bigger than the other bisons pulling the wagons of his party. Sherry sat on the coachman's seat, while Zion was inside the wagon, taking a nap. As the officers of their small mercenary group, rascals, This wagon belonged to the two of them and served as the flagship of their caravan. From time to time, the young lady would look at the compass that was lent to her by Zion in order to make sure that they were traveling in the right direction. Sean's group traveled alongside 13's caravan. Their main wagon was being pulled by a rank 2 bear avatar, which Sean managed to get during the month-long hunting they did in the valley. Fortunately, the monsters in their starting point were only rank 1 and rank 2. There were some rank 2 alpha monsters roaming as well, but they simply steered clear of it because of the danger that it posed to their lives. Rank 2 monsters, while difficult to fight for an ordinary person, didn't constitute much threat for 4 or more experienced teenagers who managed to acquire weapons after hunting rank 1 monsters. Even so, a threat was a threat, so Sean's team only fought those that had taken the initiative to attack them. The rank 2 brown bear had put up a good fight, seriously injuring 4 of their subordinates before they were able to put it down. Fortunately for them, Zion had medical supplies at hand, allowing these wanderers to recover after resting for a week. The only question in their minds was, how did he manage to put all of those items in his dimensional storage? The dimensional storage wanderers possessed only allowed their weapons and armors, as well as equipment they had gained from killing monsters to be stored. It didn't allow them to store other items aside from those they got from monster drops, quests, and rewards by the One. When Zion was asked this question, he only said that the One took pity on him for being a rank 1 wanderer for life and tweaked his dimensional storage in compensation, allowing him to bring snacks during his missions. Of course, Sean and the members of the Signy faction didn't buy his bullish asterisk tea, but since Zion didn't want to tell them, they no longer insisted on it. After 3 days of traveling, they managed to cover a lot of ground. They encountered a few monsters along the way, but since they were only rank 1 monsters, they only served as training for the Wanderers. Seeing that the sun would be setting soon, Sherry was thinking of camping beside the river. However, the dark clouds in the distance made her change her mind. "Boss, I think it's going to rain," Sherry said, still staring at the dark clouds in the distance. "You're right," 13 said. "Steer clear of the river for now and head to higher ground." As they journeyed west, they came across a river which seemed to also flow in that direction. Because of this, Sherry thought that it would be a good idea to just follow it, so they would always have access to water source. Sherry agreed with Zion's order and started moving away from the river in search of higher grounds. Since they weren't familiar with the topography of the land, it was possible that the river would rise, causing a flash flood that could possibly become troublesome for them. An hour later, heavy rain started pouring from the heavens. Since the wagons were built with a roof, the rain didn't affect the wanderers too much. They were even thankful that they had a roof above their heads to shield them from the elements. Since it was raining, Sherry returned to the wagon and chatted with her boss about her concerns. "Boss, is it really a good idea to travel with the Signy faction?" Sherry asked. "Why not?" 13 replied. "Since we're headed in the same direction, I don't see any problems with it. Our members are feeling anxious whenever they are around, especially Elyon," Sherry stated. "I can tell he doesn't think highly of us. And why should we care about that?" 13 asked with a smile. "I just have a bad feeling about him, boss," Sherry answered. "He feels like a powder keg ready to explode." "You worry too much, Sherry. Even if he explodes, he would not be exploding on our side of the fence. The ones who will have to deal with him is Sean and his comrades, not us. If that happens, then good. But what if he makes things difficult for us too?" 13 chuckled. He won't. He won't dare to make things difficult for us." The teenage boy already knew that Elyon was an ambitious person and that he would find ways to subtly wrest control of the leadership from Sean, allowing him to become the leader of the Signy faction. Of course, there was a possibility that he would try a different route, like poaching the members from 13's party and forming his own group. If he wanted to be a leader, that was certainly a viable method. Unfortunately, he didn't have a good reputation among the rascals. Zion was confident that even if he succeeded in poaching his members, they would come back crying to him after a few days. Suddenly, the smile on 13's face disappeared and was replaced by a frown. Rocky, who was keeping an eye out for threats in his hiding place under the ground, detected a group of monsters emerge from the river hundreds of meters away from their location. "What's wrong, boss?" Sherry, who saw the sudden change in the teenage boy's expression, felt that something was wrong. "I'll take a look first," 13 replied as he stepped out of the wagon. "Stay here." Sherry opened the window of the wagon and looked in the direction where Zion was headed. However, the downpour was strong, greatly reducing the visibility. She could only see several meters away from where she stood. On the other hand, 13, who was being guided by Rocky's senses, eyed the monsters that seemed to be paying close attention to their caravan from a distance. River lizard men, 13 thought as he looked at the 4 rank 1 lizard men, who seemed to be appraising whether they were easy pickings or not. These monsters noticed that 13 was looking at them, so they observed the human boy from afar. Then, one of them, who seemed to be the leader, said something to his comrades. A moment later, 2 of the lizard men returned to the river and swam away. Although it was a distance away and it was raining, Rocky was paying close attention to their conversation, so he got what they were talking about. He relayed what the leader of the lizard men told his 2 subordinates. "Report to the chief and ask for backup. We will stay here to observe the humans." Knowing that there was a possibility that they would be greatly outnumbered, 13 did what he needed to do and returned to the wagons. "Everyone, we're leaving," 13 shouted, so that his voice could be heard despite the heavy rain. "Light the lamps and follow my lead." His shout alerted the wanderers of his party, as well as the members of the Signy faction. They had no idea what was happening, but the rascals trusted Zion enough to follow his orders without asking any questions. Sherry, who was inside the wagon, lit a lamp and placed it at the holder that was attached to the rear of the wagon. Zion had taught them many tricks to travel day and night, using the light from their lamps to serve as a beacon on where they needed to go. All the other wagons also lit up their lamps and followed the procedure 13 had taught them before they started their journey. The moment Zion's wagon moved, the other wagons followed behind him. 13 made sure that the rank 2 bisons wouldn't move too fast, allowing the others to catch up. Visibility was low, but the light of the lamps were able to guide the others on the right path. The 2 lizard men who saw this decided to follow the caravan and hoped that their reinforcements would arrive before their targets escaped from their grasp. Sean, who heard 13's shout, wondered what was going on. Because of this, he ordered one of his subordinates to ask the teenage boy what was happening and why they were setting out again while it was raining cats and dogs. A few minutes later, his subordinate returned with a grim expression on his face. "Sir," Zion Leventis said that he spotted river lizard men, the subordinate reported. Because of this, he decided to leave before they called for backup. Sean and the other leaders of the Signy faction immediately understood the kind of danger they were in. However, since it was hard for them to see in the rain, they didn't know what to do. Fortunately, the lights from the lamplights of the other wagons appeared one by one, giving them an idea about what to do next. "Follow them, and make sure that you don't lose sight of the lamplights," Sean ordered. Soon, the 4 wagons that belonged to the Signy faction also started moving. Lizard men were one of the most aggressive monsters in Solterra. They hated all the other race they came across with and made a point to show it. They were also efficient hunters, and it was nearly impossible to fight against them, especially when they were in the river. River lizard men were notorious for raiding settlements near rivers, treating it as a game. They were carnivores, so humans, orcs, goblins, elves, and other races were fair game to them. While most of them were only rank 1 and rank 2 monsters, their leaders were often rank 3 or rank 4 monsters. Because of this, wanderers, especially those of the initiate rank and below, didn't want to be sent to a location near lizardmen territory. Not only were they aggressive, but they also had the territorial advantage. In short, if a bigger group really came to attack them, they would be in big trouble. 13 knew this as well, so he ordered Tiona to deal with the 2 lizard men following them from behind. The black snake slid off her master's body and disappeared in the rain. A minute later, the sound of 2 screams filled with pain reached his ears before getting drowned by the sound of rain. The wanderers, who also heard of this, felt goosebumps. Without having to see it, they were also aware of what was happening at the moment. The team leaders of each wagon approached Zion when he started shouting and asked him what was the problem. After hearing that they were in lizardmen territory, They hastily returned to their wagons in preparation to leave their campsite by following their boss wagon. Maybe this rain is a blessing in disguise, 13 thought as he followed Rocky's guidance through the downpour. His plan was to get away from the river as fast as possible while Tiona covered their tracks. Although he wished to train himself and his members in fighting against monsters, fighting lizardmen in their home turf was a very bad idea. Extremely bad idea. They could easily find themselves being attacked by hundreds of lizardmen in an encirclement, leaving them no path of escape. Of course, Rocky could also deal with these monsters and make sure that they didn't bother them. But he only planned to do that as a last resort. Putting pressure on the Wanderers would help their growth increase at a rapid pace. So this kind of development was something that Zion wouldn't mind happening from time to time. Even so, if they would really have to fight, they needed to find a better place that would give them a bit of advantage against their opponents. "Boss, where are we going?" Sherry, who was inside the carriage, asked. Although she tried to remain calm, the tinge of anxiety in her tone didn't escape 13's ears. "Somewhere away from the river," 13 replied. "But prepare yourself just in case the lizardmen catch up to us." He didn't know how long it would take for the lizardmen reinforcements to arrive, but since the two warriors following them had been killed, it would at least take their pursuers more time to catch up to them. Of course, since a lizardman's eyesight was very sensitive, it was highly possible for them to see the lamplights in the distance and follow their trail. Half an hour later, Rocky informed 13 of a cave that they could temporarily use to hide themselves. Although it was not big enough for their wagons to get into, it was just enough for their dark bisons and the teenagers to hide. 13 stopped his wagon near the cave and asked Sherry to inform everyone to go inside the cave and bring their lamplights with them. The first thing 13 did after giving his order to Sherry was free the 6 rank 2 dark bisons under his command and order them to enter the cave. The bisons followed his orders and went inside first. Soon, all the Wanderers, including the Signy faction, abandoned their wagons and evacuated inside the cave. 13 was the last one to enter and headed to the deepest part of the cave, where the other Wanderers decided to hide. Dozens of lizard men emerged from the river and looked at their surroundings. "Where are they?" a lizard man with a dark green scale asked. "They were here before we left, Captain," one of the lizard men, who was ordered to return to camp, replied. "Were you discovered?" the lizard man captain inquired. "Why, yes. A human boy saw us. Your group was careless." The captain of the lizard men from the Varesti tribe, who went by the name Sharrock, hissed in anger. "Form groups of 3 and find their trail," Sharrock ordered. "They will not be able to go far in this rain. We must find them before the other tribes get to them first." Following his orders, the lizard men formed separate teams and ran in the direction where the wagons had been parked earlier. Although it was raining hard, it was very hard to hide the traces of 16 wagons leaving at the same time. Because of this, it didn't take long for the lizard men to trace the general direction where the wagons had headed and started their pursuit. Currently, they were in a race against time because the tribal celebration was nearly upon them. Because of this, all the tribes were busy hunting for tributes they could offer to their grand chieftain. Usually, they would look for human children at this time of the year in their territories because it was as if they were sent there by their gods to be captured by them. These human children would then be taken to their grand chieftain, who would use them to fight against their rival rat men tribe, who shared dominion over the southwest region of the fractured heaven. While the lizard men held dominion over the rivers and lakes, the rat men dominated the land, corrupting their rivers from its source. Because of this, the lizard men had no choice but to fight them, which led to bloody skirmishes between the two groups. Unfortunately, in order for 13 and the other Wanderers to reach their destination, they would have to travel in the territories governed by these two groups, making their journey quite perilous. 13, who had been informed by Tiona that their pursuers had caught their trail, was forced to make a choice. The first one was to let the Wanderers fight against lizardmen to let them gain experience. The second one was to let Tiona and his monster army deal with the lizardmen, preventing any of the Wanderers from getting hurt. After thinking things through, he decided to take a gamble. "Hunters, come with me," 13 ordered. "The non-combatants stay here and continue to hide. Do not get out of the cave, no matter what, Do I make myself clear? Yes. 10 people, including Zion, headed towards the entrance of the cave together. Sean, on the other hand, was hesitating if they should come with Zion or not. After a few seconds of struggle, he ordered his subordinates to follow him. If any of you want to come, then follow me, Sean said. If not, then stay here and wait for our return. Sean no longer bothered to wait for their answer and hurriedly ran to catch up with Zion. Elyon frowned, but he made no move to leave. Heidi pondered for a bit before ordering her subordinates to follow her to assist Sean and Zion. Aren't you going with them, Natalie? Elyon asked. I don't want to get wet in this rain, Natalie replied. Elyon chuckled because he knew that his comrade had another reason why she decided to stay with him. Natalie wouldn't fight battles when the outcome was uncertain. Since there was a chance that they would be fighting against a group of lizard men, she must have thought that it was not worth it to risk her life in fighting against them. Elyon, on the other hand, was wishing that Zion and Sean would be killed by the lizardmen, so that their people would lose their leader. If that happened, he would get the perfect opportunity to make himself the leader of the group and take the first step to realizing his dream of becoming the best and strongest wanderer of his generation. They're almost here, 13 said. Subconsciously, the wanderers who had accompanied him firmly grasped the weapons in their hands. The 16 teenagers, including Sean, Heidi, and his 3 subordinates, hid behind the trees, closely watching the muddy path their wagons had passed half an hour ago. Their plan was to ambush the lizard men using the strategy Zion had formulated. Although they were still uncertain if it would work or not, they had no choice but to implement it to the best of their abilities. Their goal was simple: to successfully act as decoys so that the non-combatants that were hiding inside the cave wouldn't be targeted by the lizard men. Tiona's clone, who had spied ahead, informed her master that there were 40 lizard men currently headed in their direction. The captain of the lizard men was a rank 3 monster, and his 6 direct subordinates were rank 2 monsters. The rest were peak rank 1 monsters. Overall, they were considered a sizable hunting party among lizard men. With this information in mind, 13 deemed that they had a fighting chance if they managed to ambush the lizard men and decrease their number to even up the odds. Standing on the tree next to him was Sherry, who was holding a bow and arrow in her hands. She specialized in short swords and daggers, but she also had a knack for archery. Among the 16 teenagers who were waiting to execute an ambush, 6 of them were holding bows in their hands. Their role was to draw the enemy's attention, forcing them to come to the trees and fight them in close quarters. The 10 remaining teenagers would then engage the enemies in close combat once they had reached their hiding place. 13 would prioritize targeting the stronger lizardmen in order to lessen the burden for his team. As soon as the lizardmen finally appeared in their line of sight, the archers knocked the arrows on their bows and took aim. Since they were at a higher vantage point, while the lizardmen were only looking at what was in front of them, the latter didn't notice them right away, giving them the element of surprise. 13 had told everyone to only let loose their arrows once the first lizardmen crossed the first tree in front of them. When their target finally came within the decided striking range, 6 arrows flew in unison, their sounds being masked by the rain. But out of the 6 arrows, only 3 found their targets. Unlike the others, 13 could accurately target his opponent and make sure that his arrow would land at the place where he aimed at. With the element of surprise in their side, his first arrow hit the eye of one of the rank 2 lizardmen, while his second arrow hit its comrade's neck. 13 was firing in rapid succession because he needed to take down as many lizardmen as he could before they regained their bearings. The monsters didn't expect that an ambush was waiting for them, so the moment their members got hit by the arrows, they hastily retreated to take cover. 13 was able to take down 3 lizardmen with his accurate shots. On the other hand, Sherry took down 1 and injured 2 more. As for the other archers, they didn't manage to kill any of the monsters, but they still managed to land some good hits at their enemies. Plan B, 13 ordered, and his team hastily retreated from their hiding spots. He had made several plans depending on how the enemy would react to their ambush. If their enemies charged at them, Sean and the other wanderers who had avatars would summon their avatars and fight the lizardmen in close combat. But since the enemy didn't charge at them and chose to retreat right away, it meant that they were able to assess that it was dangerous to blindly charge at the hiding spot of their enemies without understanding how many they were. "Captain, what should we do?" one of the rank 2 lizardmen who survived 13th's ambush asked. "We'll go around and ambush them from behind," Sharrock ordered. "Half of you will circle around them. The rest follow me." The lizardmen entered the forest cautiously. They assessed that at least 2 of the archers were proficient in range combat and could effectively kill them if they were careless. Because of this, they used the trees as cover while heading deeper into the forest. 13, who was sharing his vision with Tiona's clone, drew his bow to its fullest before releasing an arrow. A pained cry spread in the forest as his arrow pierced through the eye of another rank 2 lizardman, killing it instantly. While their scales were hard and could resist sword strikes to a certain extent, their eyes were not as protected as the rest of their bodies. Other archers would find the feat of targeting the lizardman's eyes from a distance extremely hard, especially with the rain and the cover of the trees obscuring their vision. But 13 didn't have this problem. He would simply calculate where the lizardman would go and release his arrow accordingly. After becoming a rookie, he was now able to endure extensive calculations without suffering a backlash. Because of this, he didn't have to worry about pushing himself too much, allowing him to become a truly dangerous threat to his foes. Sharrock, who saw the man standing next to him die, hurriedly hid behind a tree and raised his hand. He also communicated with the others using the language of the lizardmen, thinking that their ambushers couldn't understand them. "Crawl on all fours and lay as low to the ground as possible," Sharrock ordered. "They have a good marksman with them." Crawling on all fours wasn't a problem for lizardmen. This was something they were used to doing, especially when sneaking into the ratmen settlements in their territory. However, no matter where they hid, 13 knew where they were. His parade of 100 demons were also around the forest, watching their every move. Sharrock thought that he made a good decision, but a few minutes later, screams were once again heard on the side of the forest where the second team had gone earlier. Sherry, Sean, Heidi, and the others went to work and attacked the lizardmen alongside their avatars. Only 13 was left to face off against Sherrick's team, distracting them from the true plan that he had in mind. Because the lizardmen captain was spooked by the unknown archer's accuracy, he ordered his direct subordinates to follow him, leaving the rest of the rank 1 lizardmen to group together. However, all the wanderers who fought against the second party of lizardmen had avatars. Since the enemy was now outnumbered 2-1, the teenagers felt more confident that they could win against them. Of course, Tiona's subordinates were also paying close attention to the battle, ready to help if one of the wanderers were about to get seriously injured, or worse, lose their lives in the skirmish. Sharrock screeched and ordered for his men to charge forward to where the sounds of screams were coming from. But at that exact moment, he heard a subtle whistle, which made him forcefully raise his shield to block the arrow that was flying in his direction. 13's arrow embedded itself on the lizardman captain's shield, who didn't even bother to stop crawling on the ground in order to head to where his subordinates were. While he was still wary of the archer attacking them from a distance, he was more worried about his subordinates whose screams were sounding increasingly desperate with each passing second. Sean and Heidi fought back to back alongside their avatars. Sean had summoned a rank 2 bear, while Heidi had summoned a rank 2 wolf. Both were the top predators in the valley where they had stayed for a month. They were lucky enough to gain avatars, allowing them to fight against the lizardmen with relative ease. However, what surprised them the most was Sherry's avatar. Not that they were surprised to see that she had one, but the one she had wasn't an ordinary avatar. It was a rank 3 alpha monster that went by the name Blade Panther. Standing 2 meters tall, this deadly monster that could summon a pair of retractable blades at the side of its body was the one responsible for killing half of the lizardmen who had tried to circle around them. The other wanderers had known Sherry for a long time, but they never saw her summon this creature during the 1 month that they were together. So they were very surprised when she led their team to fight against the lizardman's second party while Zion distracted the team that was led by the rank 3 lizardman captain. It was a one-sided massacre, and even Sherry was surprised with how deadly her avatar was. Freewebnovel.com. Sherry acquired these powerful avatar after 3 weeks of their arrived in Solterra. Zion had asked her to accompany him to a scouting mission in the valley. Suddenly, they saw a seriously injured Blade Panther who was no longer able to stand or fight that was lying on the ground. Originally, this Blade Panther planned to feast on the Wanderers, which it had detected in its territory. However, the teenage boy asked his subordinates to deal with the Blade Panther and leave it half dead so that Sherry could kill it later. Since the teenage girl was now his right-hand woman, he needed to arm her properly so that her chances of survival would also increase. The stronger she was, the more tasks she would be able to handle under his lead. But Sherry insisted that Zion should be the one to kill the Blade Panther instead. However, after the teenage boy explained that he wouldn't gain anything by killing the Blade Panther, Sherry remembered the information about Zion that was available to the public. Rank ban, item ban, skill ban, and avatar ban. Because of these restrictions, Zion was unable to gain any benefits from killing monsters. That was why he didn't actively land the killing blow unless it was absolutely necessary. But Sherry didn't expect that she would gain an extremely powerful avatar in her first wandering. There was a saying among wanderers: the greater the disparity of the monster to your rank, the better the rewards by killing it. This meant that killing rank 3 monsters and above while you're still a rookie would give you a high chance to gain powerful items, including their avatars. Since Sherry was currently rankless, the chances of her getting something good was extremely high. She just didn't expect that she would get a powerful avatar, which was too good for her current rank to possess. Suddenly, the sound of a horn being blown spread in the forest, informing Sherry and the others that the second party of the lizardmen were headed in their direction. Fortunately, they had almost annihilated the lizardmen party that they had ambushed, giving them a bit of confidence in facing off against their new enemies. Half a minute later, 10 lizardmen appeared in the clearing and attacked the rank 1 avatars that belonged to the Wanderers. Sharrock, who had seen the dead bodies of his men, was incensed and didn't hesitate to attack the teenagers without a shred of mercy for his reptilian face. But when the Blade Panther roared and lunged in the lizard captain's direction, Sherrick's earlier rage subsided, replaced by horror. Although he was a rank 3 monster, he understood then and there that the Blade Panther was stronger, faster, and more merciless than he was. The two clashed, with Sharrock skidding on the ground due to the disparity in strength. That single exchange was enough to tell him that this opponent was too dangerous for him to fight on his own. "Retreat," Sharrock commanded, and the survivors hurriedly ran after their leader. But he had just taken a few steps when an arrow hit his knee, making him grunt in pain. A second later, another arrow hit his other knee, making him fall to the ground. "Don't let any of them escape," 13 ordered, waking the Wanderers from their daze. "Pursue them." Sherry commanded the Blade Panther, who ran past the fallen lizard captain and attacked the fleeing lizard men. "Don't kill him," 13 said as he pointed at the lizard captain. "I'll be back after I deal with the small fries." Right now, his priority was to prevent any of the lizard men from returning to their tribe. Right now, they were only dealing with a hunting party, so they were able to manage. But if even one of the lizard men managed to escape and go back to report, they would have to deal with several hunting teams, with higher-ranked lizard men among them. Because of this, he ordered his parade of 100 demons to kill the fleeing lizard men, sparing no one. Now was not the time to be choosy with what method he would use to eliminate his opponent. What was important was that none of them escaped, lest they become the seed of trouble that would make their journey more perilous. He didn't even worry that the lizardman captain would be able to stand back up again. His arrows were coated with a special paralyzing venom that came from a rank 5 amphispina. A rank 3 monster would not be strong enough to overcome its venom, especially since the affected part was its knee. This somehow crippled Sharrock from walking. Half an hour later, Zion returned alongside the Blade Panther, who had killed most of the lizard men with its incredible speed and fighting abilities. "State the name of your tribe," 13 ordered, speaking in the tongue of the lizard men. Sharrock, who was unable to move, looked at the teenage boy in surprise. He didn't expect that a human boy could speak their language. "I am Sharrock of the Varesti tribe," Sharrock replied, using the lizardmen language. "Who are you? And how come you know how to speak our language?" "Who I am is not important," 13 answered. "What is important is that you answer my questions." "Foolish human," Sharrock sneered. "A lizard man would not betray his tribe." "That's what they all say before they meet my friend, Giga," 13 sneered back. "We'll see who is the foolish one between us." Sherry, Sean, and Heidi, who could vaguely tell that Zion and the lizard men were having a proper conversation, looked at the teenage boy with awe. However, they didn't have the leisure of admiring him because 13 told them to start ransacking the equipment of the lizard men and take them back to the cave with them. The lizard men were carrying spears and shields, which was a good addition to the weapon each of the wanderers possessed. Also, this battle against the lizard men allowed them to gain items. Even though none of them managed to get a lizardman avatar, the rewards they got were worth the effort of fighting against them. 13 asked Sherry to order the Blade Panther to carry Sharrock to a place far from the clearing. He planned to interrogate the lizard men because he believed that they were soon entering lizard men territory. The more he knew about them, the more he would be able to create plans on how to prevent their group from getting into conflicts with them. The ideal scenario was for them to reach a compromise with the lizard men and enter a non-aggression pact. However, 13 believed that this was a long shot, considering that they were young and the lizard men had more numbers than them. Sharrock, who was being taken away, was still confident that the humans wouldn't be able to pry any answers from his lips. He wasn't aware that before the rain stopped falling, he would be speaking their tribe's darkest secrets to the teenage boy, who had a very good interrogation technique, one that could make the most stubborn people and monsters answer his questions without fail. "Moors, where's Zion?" Sherry asked her Blade Panther, who was blocking her path. The Blade Panther shook its head and replied to its master with a low growl. "I can't see him right now," Sherry asked. The Blade Panther nodded and whimpered. "Take me to him." "That's an order," Sherry said in a stubborn tone. "You should listen to me as your master." The Blade Panther pondered for a bit, but in the end, it firmly shook its head. Sherry was its master, so it was supposed to protect her. That was why it didn't dare to let the young lady approach the crazy teenage boy, who was currently interrogating the captured lizardman captain. Moors had witnessed how 13 forced Sharrock into talking. After seeing it once, it hastily left the scene to prevent its master from seeing something that would stay with her for life. Sherry, who didn't expect that her own avatar would refuse her order, tried to peek past Moors, but the Blade Panther blocked her sight, preventing her from seeing anything. "Are you really not going to move away?" Sherry asked. "I'll unsummon you if you don't move." Moors was unfazed by its master's threat. Even if Sherry were to mean those words, it would stay in place till the very last second. The two stared at each other for a few seconds before Sherry finally sighed and relented. Avatars were very loyal to their master and would obey them without fail. Since Moors were refusing to obey her orders, it only meant that it was only doing it for her own good. "Just what is happening over there?" Sherry mused. "Isn't it just a simple interrogation? Why is Moors acting like this? Is he preventing me from seeing something I shouldn't see?" Of course, the young lady had not an inkling that Zion's interrogation wasn't anything ordinary. Even the most stubborn of people would start talking after experiencing his interrogation methods just once. "The name of our great chieftain is Lord Drazit. He is one of the 5 lords of the lizard men who governs the rivers and lakes of the fractured heaven," Sharrock said in a fearful tone. "How strong is he?" 13 asked. "Rank 6 sovereign," Sharrock replied. At the start, the lizardman captain refused to answer 13's question. However, after inhaling Giga Chad's Giga Destroyer original version, he started to talk, no longer caring that he was betraying his comrades in the slightest. He simply wished for his suffering to end. 13 proceeded to ask more questions, allowing him to slowly understand more about the current state of the war between the lizard men and the rat men. Soon, he heard wanderers being involved, and a frown emerged on his face. Both sides had captured wanderers who were spirited away in this location in the past, and were using them as cannon fodder for their war. He also learned that there was a small group of wanderers who were trying to free their fellow humans from both sides. They were the wanderers who managed to flee from the lizardmen's and ratmen's attempt to capture them after they arrived in Solterra for the first time. Do they perhaps have the same mission as I do? 13 thought. After asking Sharrock more questions, 13 pondered whether he should kill him or not. If Sharrock was an ordinary lizardman, the teenage boy wouldn't bat an eye and would have had him devoured by the Black Flag, making him part of his army. However, after finding out about his identity, 13 believed that Sharrock would be more useful to him alive than dead. The lizardman captain was the sixth son of Lord Drazit, one of the 5 lords of the lizardmen. Because of his identity, the other party was more valuable to him alive than dead. An hour later, 13 returned to the cave with Sherry and her Blade Panther, Morse. The Blade Panther was carrying the captured lizardman, who was currently unconscious. Sean had already informed the rest about the battle that transpired, bragging about their flawless strategy under Zion's command. Naturally, Leon didn't like how the teams that left earlier didn't suffer any casualties. Even so, he kept a smile on his face as he listened to Sean's bragging about the battle that he had fought alongside the commander of the Alliance. "You should have been there," Sean said to Leon. "It was exhilarating." "Yeah, maybe next time," Leon replied in a non-committal manner. "But what do we do now?" Leon glanced at Zion, who was currently talking to his members. When he heard that Sherry gained a rank 3 Alpha Blade Panther, the young man felt so envious. After all, he only had a rank 2 Wolf as his avatar. Of course, it was not only him who felt this way. Almost everyone, including the Wanderers who belonged to Zion's faction, felt the same. A few minutes later, 13 gathered everyone and told them about their current situation. "I have bad news, and more bad news," 13 said. "What do you all want to hear first?" Everyone looked at him with grim expressions on their faces. Since there was no other option aside from bad news, it meant that their current situation was not looking good. Seeing that all of them had resigned themselves to hear the bad news, 13 no longer hesitated and told them about the information he gained from interrogating Sharrock. "We are currently sandwiched between an ongoing war between the Lizardmen and the Ratmen," 13 said. "To make matters worse, both sides are actively capturing Wanderers to serve as cannon fodders in their armies. If we continue to head west, we will just be going deeper into their territories, and the chances of them finding us is extremely high. It is no exaggeration to say that if we continue to push forward, our lives will be in danger." Silence descended upon the cave as everyone digested Zion's words. The silence lasted for nearly 3 minutes before one of the Wanderers and his team spoke out. "Then what should we do?" 13 didn't answer right away. Instead, he scanned everyone's faces before telling everyone about his crazy plan. "We need to pick a side," 13 stated. "That's the only way for us to survive. If he really wanted to, he could have just knocked everyone unconscious and have Rocky carry them inside his mobile fortress, only waking them up once they've reached their destination. But he didn't plan to do that. After interrogating Sharrock, he realized that just running away wouldn't solve the problem. They needed to pick a side, not only to survive, but also to gain an opportunity to free the other Wanderers who found themselves in the middle of a war that would decide their fate. But in order to pull that off, he needed to make Sharrock his ally first. Although it was a long shot, and the chances of success were small, he still believed that this was the most optimal choice they currently had right now. Of course, there was a chance that Sharrock would betray them. Fortunately, he also had a way to ensure that it wouldn't happen. If negotiations with the Lizardmen were to fail, well, he would just have to become the third party in this war, with the goal of freeing the other Wanderers from their enslavement. With the forces under his control and the tricks under his sleeve, he believed that he could do guerrilla tactics that would push the Lizardmen and the Ratmen to the brink of their sanity. "This is crazy, but it seems that we have no other choice but to become crazy to survive," Heidi whispered in Sean's ear. "What do you think, Sean? Should we go along with Zion's plan? Do we have a choice?" Sean replied, "Otherwise, do you want to return to that valley where it's safe and wait until someone clears the mission first?" Heidi smiled bitterly because her friend was right. Their only choice was to go forward or to go backward. Since going back to the valley wasn't an option for the Signy faction, They had no choice but to join Zion's bandwagon, which seemed to be headed to damnation and beyond. Zion, are you sure we can trust this lizard man? Sherry asked as she covertly looked at Sharrock, who was walking beside their wagon. Yes, 13 replied. Just where is that confidence of yours coming from? Your worries are valid, but just trust me when I say that he won't do anything to harm us. After careful consideration, 13 decided to use one of his trump cards. And which trump card? It was none other than Evavug's child, the Overlord Beetle, whom 13 had named Gwen. 13 had been feeding Gwen beast cores, for it was one of his beast companions. By this time, the Overlord Beetle had become a rank 2 monster, and its ability to mind control others had also leveled up. Unfortunately, the Overlord Beetle could only use mind control on monsters that were rank 4 and below. Gwen also had a limit on how many it could control at once. At the moment, the number of monsters it could dominate was 5. Because of this, he didn't hesitate to have Gwen use mind control on Sharrock and make him one of their loyal allies. When near our tribe, Zion, Sharrock said. Understood, 13 replied. Please do your best to convince them. It will be hard, but I'll see what I can do. Sharrock nodded. Gwen's mind control was unique in the sense that those under its command would act just like how they usually did. The only difference they had from their previous self was that they would treat Zion better and listen to his words seriously. If 13 asked them to jump on the spot, they would jump, thinking that it was a very normal thing to do. It was a form of brainwashing that was very effective against rank 4 monsters, as well as wanderers whose rank was elite or lower. As much as possible, 13 didn't want to use this ability against humans. But if the situation called for it, he wouldn't hesitate to do it as a last resort. Right now, Gwen was inside Rocky's mobile fortress. The scary part was that the Overlord Beetle could mind control anyone within a 1,000-meter radius of it. Evavug had already terrorized the battlefield during the Rigel continent invasion. Once Gwen reached the same rank as its parent, it would become an even bigger threat. The moment it succeeded in dominating someone's mind, it no longer mattered how far apart they were. Whether they were in Pangea or Solterra, as long as Gwen had planted its power within their minds, they were as good as his slaves. If the Overlord Beetle fell into the wrong hands, they would definitely abuse its powers and use it to move unhindered within Pangea and Solterra. Evavug knew of Gwen's potential, which was why it tried to birth it. Unfortunately, it didn't expect that 13 and Jalrog would be raiding its nest, preventing the brain beetle from realizing its goal. 13's only regret was the limited number of creatures Gwen could control right now. If only it could control at least 20 creatures, then things would be much easier for him. Everyone, stay here for the time being, 13 ordered. Sharrock will go to his tribe to announce our arrival. Sharrock gave 13 a brief nod before heading towards the river. Soon, the lizard man swam away in a hurry, making the teenagers look at the river with conflicted expressions on their faces. Listen to me, and listen very closely, 13 said. Even if Sharrock speaks on our behalf, there's a chance that the lizard men will act hostile against us. When that happens, they will definitely send their people to capture us. What should we do then? Sean asked. If that happens, then we will have no choice but to run away, 13 answered. But I think we have a good chance of convincing them that we can be allies with them. And if not, Leon inquired. Then we run away. 13 replied, as if this was already the very obvious thing to do. The question is, will we be able to run away? Natalie asked. Yes, 13 replied. Although Sharrock said that we're near his tribe, we're actually in a location where they won't spot us easily. Also, Tiona here has the ability to detect monsters from a good distance. She will know if the lizard man had sent a force big enough to capture all of us. After hearing Zion's explanation, the other wanderers were able to breathe easier. They really thought that they had to risk their lives to fight against an entire lizardman tribe, which was an impossible task to accomplish. Since they were near enemy territory, 13 forbade anyone from exploring the surroundings and even cooking food using fire. Everyone was ordered to eat their rations, which was meat jerky, until Sharrock returned with the news. Of course, he had also taken into account the possibility that Sharrock wouldn't be able to return. Regardless of the result, 13 and Sharrock had an agreement that the lizard man would return before sunset. If he didn't return, it just meant that he was unable to return. 3 hours after Sharrock had left 13's group, Tiona raised her head and looked in the direction of the river. She let out a light hiss, informing her master that there were lizard men headed in their direction, and among them was Sharrock. Seeing that he only brought 3 of his people with him, it seems that the talks had progressed smoothly, 13 thought. Sharrock wouldn't have led them to their hiding place otherwise. "Everyone, please prepare," 13 said. "We have guests." The Wanderers didn't take out their weapons, but all of them had raised their guard. When Sharrock and the 3 lizard men arrived at their hiding place, 13 noticed the lizard man a rank higher than Sharrock, eyeing him from head to foot. "Is this him?" the lizard man asked. "Yes, brother," Sharrock replied. "He is Zion Leventis, the person that I've talked to you about. Zion, this is my brother, Vorel. He is our great chieftain's right-hand man. I've heard about you from my brother, and frankly, I am half tempted to capture all of you and punish you for the crime of killing our people," Vorel stated. "But my brother convinced me that you will be of greater help to us as allies instead of slaves. But I still want you to tell me, why must I turn a blind eye to your transgressions?" "Because we didn't do anything wrong," 13 replied. "If we were weak, your people would have already captured or killed us during our first encounter." Vorel smirked as he scanned the faces of the Wanderers who were also present in their discussion. Some of the teenagers flinched from the rank 4 monster's stare, but some held his gaze, which made Vorel very satisfied. "Well, I guess my brother isn't wrong about giving you kids a chance to become our allies," Vorel stated. "Very well. We will accept all of you as our allies for now. However, if you do anything to break our trust, we will not hesitate to punish all of you for your wrongdoings. Do I make myself clear?" 13 nodded. "Yes. Let us work hand in hand to eliminate the rat men." The teenage boy reached out his hand for a handshake, and Vorel accepted the gesture. Clearly, it was not his first time dealing with humans, so he understood the significance of a handshake. "Escort them back to our tribe," Vorel commanded. "I'll go ahead and tell the great chieftain about the outcome of this discussion." Vorel gave Zion one last glance before leaving the scene. Unlike the other lizard men, he was someone who didn't underestimate the potential of humans despite them being weaker than them. When he was young, he had been saved by a human, so he was a little biased toward them. 13 sighed in his heart. It seemed that he could work together with Vorel in order to reach his goals. Of course, he had a backup plan just in case things didn't turn out the way he wanted. Rocky was currently hundreds of meters beneath the ground he stood on, so if Vorel really acted hostile toward them, Gwyn would immediately dominate his mind and make him 13's loyal ally by force. "Let's go," 13 said. "We're going to the Varesti tribe." It took 3 hours for 13 and his group to reach the location of the Varesti tribe. Sharrock guided them to the shallow rivers where their wagons could traverse to the other side without much difficulty. Along the way, several lizard men hunting party noticed their approach, but no one blocked their path. Sharrock was well known in the Varesti tribe, and many lizard men respected him. The only thing these hunting parties did was gaze at them from afar, as if assessing if these recent human recruits would be of use to their war against the Ratmen. When they finally arrived at the village, the other Wanderers immediately noticed that there were other humans aside from them. The majority of these humans were around the same age as them, so it was very easy to know who they were. Wanderers, Sean thought as he looked at the humans that had some sort of mark on their foreheads. It looked like a triangle with a dot in the middle, which probably symbolized that they were humans who belonged to the Varesti tribe. Perhaps, seeing that Sean and the other Wanderers were curious about the mark, Sharrock decided to explain it to them. "It's a mark drawn by our shaman," Sharrock explained. "It doesn't hurt them in any way, but it allows us to know their location, as well as detect if they are having bad thoughts regarding our tribe. All of you will probably have the same mark as well. This is also for your own safety, just in case you come across other lizardmen hunting parties that belong to other tribes. If you don't have this mark on your forehead, they will think of you as someone not affiliated with us, and they might capture or kill you on the spot." Sean and the other Wanderers frowned. If a shaman had drawn this, it meant that it had some other kind of enchantment that might take away their freedom. Only 13 wasn't too concerned about this, knowing that such markings would not have any effect against him. His skill band would render this mark useless, allowing him to do whatever he needed to do without worrying about the consequences of his actions. I know that all of you might have concerns about the mark, but we have no choice but to follow their rules, 13 said in order to calm everyone down. At least, they're not tying our hands and feet. This is a much better treatment compared to becoming their slaves. 13 then glanced at some of the wanderers who had ropes tied around their neck. These were the slaves of the lizard men. The markings on their heads were also different. Instead of a triangle, it was a circle with a dot in the middle. This meant that unlike the wanderers who retained a bit of their freedom, these slaves couldn't do anything unless their master gave them permission to do it. "You're finally here," Vorel said as soon as 13's group arrived in front of a cave, which was slightly bigger than the ones that they had seen in the Lizardmen village. "The great chieftain wishes to speak with you, Zion." 13 nodded before glancing at the other wanderers. "Stay here and don't do anything reckless," 13 said. "We are safe as long as we cooperate with them. Please keep that in mind. Sherry, look after our people." Sherry nodded. "Understood." After giving his order, 13 followed behind Vorel and entered the cave together with him. The cave was dark, but Zion could see the surroundings without any problems because he had dark vision. This was one of the unique abilities that he had gained as a reward after completing his 13 trials in Solterra. Vorel, who thought that Zion would stumble in the darkness, was surprised. Not only were the young man's steps steady, but it also seemed that he could see through the darkness of the cave. Finally, after walking for nearly 5 minutes, they arrived at a spacious cavern. "Welcome, Zion Leventis," a lizard man visibly bigger than the others said with a smile. "I was wondering what you looked like, but just as expected, you looked very young, just like the other humans that our tribe has captured this year. I greet the great chieftain of the Varesti tribe." 13 placed his closed fist over his chest and gave the lizard man in front of him a respectful bow. "I am Zion Leventis, the leader of the humans who decided to fight alongside your tribe against the rat men." "I like you, kid." The great chieftain chuckled. "You didn't show any signs of fear as you looked at me, and you didn't bow your head too low, which meant that you didn't think of yourself as a slave of our people. I've seen many of your kind, and the number of children who are able to keep their calm when they see me can be counted with one hand," the great chieftain, who was at least 4 meters tall, said with a smile. "So, tell me, what kind of reward would you like to have after you completed your side of our agreement? You must want something in exchange for your services, right? That's what human mercenaries do, after all." Mercenaries. This was the option 13 had chosen to deal with the Varesti tribe. He asked Sharrock to present themselves as mercenaries who were willing to work with the Varesti tribe against the rat men for a price. "I want all the humans in the Varesti tribe to be freed and put under my management," 13 answered. As expected, the great chieftain nodded. "Very well. If you can accomplish the mission that I will ask you to do tomorrow, I will grant your request. But if you fail—" "I will not fail," 13 replied. "But if I do succeed, I wish to get better accommodations for my people." "Haha, I thought you would say that if you succeed, I should free a few humans to become part of your group." The great chieftain laughed. "It seems that you intend to stay here in our tribe for a while, yes?" "Yes, great chieftain," 13 replied. "That is my plan." "Good." The great chieftain nodded. "I now give you the right to call me by my name. You will refer to me as Lord Vess." "Understood, Lord Vess," 13 smiled faintly. "I look forward to having a good relationship with you and the Varesti tribe from this day onwards." After 13 had left the cave and returned to his people, Lord Vess glanced at the shaman beside him. "Is he the one who cast the mind spell on my son, Sharrock?" Lord Vess asked. "No," the shaman replied. "But he has the means to remove it." Lord Vess rubbed his chin. "That boy's mannerisms showed that he isn't afraid of me. Should I be concerned?" The shaman frowned. "Maybe the reason he isn't afraid of you is because his helper has the means to also put a mind spell on you. But since he didn't do it, maybe he has a reason for visiting our tribe." "It's the humans," Lord Vess stated. "He wants to take them off our hands." "Maybe you're right, or maybe he has other plans," the shaman commented. "But I will tell you this. My appraisal ability didn't work on him. Also, he is accompanied by one of Death's chosen. He's not a simple human. I agree. Lord Vess frowned. Make sure the symbol you place on him is strengthened. That way, we'll at least be able to know his thoughts. You can do that, right? The shaman pondered for a while before reluctantly nodding his head. I'll do it, but don't expect too much, the shaman replied. Just remember, be careful of him. Although you are very resistant to mind spells, it will not hurt to be extra careful around him. I have a feeling that if he wished for it, he could easily subdue our entire tribe by force. What a coincidence. I feel the same way. Lord Vess narrowed his eyes. So let's put him to the test. Let's give him that mission. The shaman's eyes widened in shock, but he soon regained his calm after a few seconds. Good idea. The shaman agreed. Not only will we know his ability, but if he succeeds, then the Ratmen will receive a very painful blow that we can take advantage of. Lord Vess chuckled. Indeed, since he wants to work for us, we need to put him to good use, no? Both lizard men shared a knowing glance with each other before looking at the red crystal inside the cave, which could change the tide of battle in their favor. Elyon grimaced as the shaman of the Varesti tribe inscribed on his forehead the symbol signifying that they were humans part of the lizardmen's faction. However, instead of the triangle or circle they've seen on the other wanderers before, the symbol placed on their forehead was a letter V with a dot in the middle. This indicated that they were not slaves, but allies of the Varesti tribe. Their current status would also garner them a different kind of treatment from the other lizardmen tribes. Frankly, the wanderers disliked this marking ceremony, especially the scions of the Signy faction. It made them feel like they were becoming the subordinates of others. Despite what they thought, all of them endured it because they were currently in the Varesti tribe's territory. After all the wanderers, including 13, had been marked by the shaman, they were led to the temporary residence prepared for them. They were given a few days to rest before heading to the front lines of the battlefield. While everyone was relaxing, 13 was listening to Tiona's report about the scouting her clone had done around the Varesti tribe's domain. Aside from their chieftain and the shaman, the strongest monsters here are 5 rank 4 monsters, including Vorel, 13 thought after hearing Tiona's report. This means that their strongest warriors are currently on the front lines, fighting against the Ratmen. He didn't find anything wrong with this report, even thinking that it was very normal for the strongest combatants to be on a battlefield. If 13 wished for it, he could probably take down the entire Varesti tribe by employing a blitzkrieg attack with the help of his monster army. But doing it would harm his chances of reaching his goal. Despite their looks and fierce behavior, lizardmen were actually very honorable and righteous when it came to their friends and allies. They might dislike races that weren't their own, but they still had higher tolerance compared to the arrogant elves and the stubborn dwarves. Meeting a lizardman in the wild didn't exactly mean that they would attack you on sight. However, the current circumstances in the fractured heaven were special. The lizardmen were at war with the Ratmen, so every other race, until proven otherwise, were their enemies. This included the humans who had appeared in their domains. Ratmen were a savage race. For them, almost any other race was food or soon-to-be food. Very few humans would survive when passing through territories under the control of the Ratmen. The only situation when they would be spared from being eaten or used as cannon fodders in the war was when the humans had something of value or proved that they could benefit the Ratmen by staying alive. According to Sharrock, there were many humans who had been captured by the Ratmen. They were either used as slaves, cannon fodders, or worse, emergency food. 13's goal was simple. He wanted to free the humans kept by both the lizardmen and the Ratmen. The teenage boy didn't have a noble goal behind this. But since he was already there, he couldn't possibly turn a blind eye to their suffering. After all, he couldn't be too sure whether one of his acquaintances had been captured by these two races or not. Many years ago, 13 wouldn't have cared much if wanderers were kept as slaves by the lizardmen and Ratmen. But things were different this time. He now had responsibilities and people whom he cared about. Also, he had a feeling that he might meet one of the members of the hero party on this mission. 13 didn't know why he felt this way, but his senses were screaming at him that this possibility existed. If Shauna, Erica, Mildred or Diana were there, he would, of course, do his best to save them. If it was Derek, he could still lend a hand. However, if it was Roland or Joshua, the teenage boy wouldn't lift a finger to help them. Since they are fate's favorites, I'm sure they will be fine, 13 mused. Those two need to suffer more to grow faster. Also, Tiona's clone not only looked for the strongest members of the Lizardmen tribe, but it also searched for all the wanderers who were currently inside the Varesti tribe. After confirming that none of his friends or acquaintances were there, 13 felt relieved and disappointed at the same time. Relieved because none of the people he knew was there. Disappointed because if they were there, he could probably come to an agreement with the chieftain to let his acquaintances join his group. That way, he would be able to free them from their current situation, which would also boost his team's fighting prowess. 2 days later, 13 and his group were escorted by Sharrock to one of the battlefields where help was greatly needed. Several days ago, we received reports saying that our forces in the Pangea swamp were being pushed back because of the corruption that was spreading in its waters, Sharrock replied. The Ratmen are using nefarious ancient magic to pollute the source of water that flows into our territories. They know that once we lose our advantage over them, they would have a higher chance of winning this war. Our shamans are doing their best to counter their spells and purify the water source, but it is an uphill battle. If we lose this front of the battlefield, a hole in our defensive perimeter will fall. The other Lizardmen will then look down on us and think that the Varesti tribe is the weakest link among all the tribes. Sharrock was feeling anxious because compared to the other places, their tribe was facing intense battles almost every day. Also, according to their scouts, the number of the Ratmen was also increasing. This could lead to a large-scale battle that would put the defenders of the Varesti tribe at a great disadvantage. This was why, aside from 13th's group, all the other humans who were in the tribe were immediately sent to the front lines, perhaps thinking that they would be able to fight better if a fellow human was leading them. The great chieftain appointed 13 as the captain of the humans. Of course, the teenage boy accepted this responsibility because this was his goal from the beginning. All he needed to do was gain more of the Varesti tribe's trust so that they could act as a mediator for the other Lizardmen tribes to put their human captives under his leadership as well. After traveling for 3 days, 13's group finally arrived in the Pangea swamp. Even from afar, they could hear the sound of an ongoing battle, which made Sharrock frown. "Let's hurry," Sharrock shouted. "They might need our help." 13 nodded and ordered everyone to quicken up their pace. They had brought the wagons with them on this journey, using them as a resting place, as well as a means to store their weapons and other items needed for the battle. 20 minutes later, they arrived just in time to see dozens of Ratmen breaking past the defenses of the Lizardmen and engaging them in close combat. When Sharrock saw this, he didn't hesitate to charge forward to assist his comrades, leaving 13 and the other wanderers behind. "Everyone, grab your weapons and follow me," 13 ordered. "Listen to my orders well, and do not engage in close combat. We are not in our peak condition, so we will only use range weapons to attack the Ratmen. If some of them decide to attack us, the Hunters and the Signy faction will deal with them. As for the rest, do as practiced, okay?" "Yes, blow the horns," 13 ordered. All the supporters who weren't proficient in fighting immediately blew the horns that they were carrying on their bodies. This loud and intimidating sound spread across the battlefield, making the Lizardmen and the Ratmen subconsciously glance in their direction for a brief moment. He ordered them to sound the horn to tell their allies that reinforcements had come, and to make the Ratmen feel pressured from knowing that there were more enemies for them to fight. With all the wanderers following behind 13, he immediately summoned his bow and arrows and began shooting the moment he came within striking range. Each shot hit its mark, making the Lizardmen whom he had helped look in his direction. The teenage boy prioritized attacking the Ratmen who were on the verge of killing or dealing serious injury to the Lizardmen. Right now, they needed all able-bodied fighters on the battlefield, so if he could save one more Lizardman, the better. Sharrock wasn't lying when he said that the enemy's numbers are greater than the Lizardmen, 13 thought as he fired one arrow after another. 13 gave the other wanderers a crash course on how to use a bow and arrow. Although they hadn't become proficient in using them, they at least knew how to properly use them. In fact, 13 didn't teach them how to aim. No, he only made them understand how far their arrows could reach when fired from different angles with their bows. Because of this, dozens of arrows rained down on the rear of the enemy forces, making them cry out in pain and anger. The other archers in 13's team weren't as proficient as him, but they played their role well. Although not all of their arrows hit something, it made the rat men more wary, knowing that they could get hit by an arrow anywhere, anytime. Seeing that their reinforcements were helping them push back their enemies, the lizard men regained their morale and cried out their war cries, boosting their group's overall fighting prowess. It didn't take long for the rat men to understand that the longer they stayed, the more of their brethren would be killed. With a screech of anger that spread on the battlefield, the leader of the rat men ordered his subordinates to retreat. Just like a receding flood, the rat men pulled back as quickly as they came. The lizard men wanted to pursue them, but a loud shout stopped them in their tracks. "Stop!" The commander of the Varesti tribe, Drazit, shouted, stopping his subordinates from leaving their camp. After ensuring that the rat men had completely retreated, Drazit immediately ordered for the wounded to be taken to the rear of the formation, where their shamans could heal their injuries. When all of the injured had been taken care of, he ordered the warriors to take care of the dead and the dying. Not all rat men had died. Some of them were merely playing dead on the ground or had become unconscious after receiving a good strike in the head. Because of this, the lizardmen warriors would stab their enemies' chests as a safety procedure to ensure that all the rat men were exterminated. There had been cases when the rat men had waited for the right opportunity to strike, taking a lizard man or two with them to the afterlife. To prevent this from happening again, the warriors took this duty seriously. Only when they were certain that all the enemies were dead did the commander finally glance at Sharrak, who had come to help them during their dire moment. "I've received word that the tribe is going to send reinforcements," Drazit said. "So are these the new batch of humans that have been captured during the past few days?" "Yes," Sharrak replied before pointing in 13's direction. "Right now, they're following the orders of that teenage boy. His name is Zion Leventis." "Zion Leventis?" Drazit frowned. "I think I have heard that name before." Aside from 13's team, there were other humans who were also present in the camp. So the moment their gaze landed on the teenage boy, some of them became ecstatic because they recognized him right away. 13 glanced at the 20 or so teenagers, who were already inside the lizardmen camp, and saw no familiar faces among them. He made a mental note to talk to them after Sharrak had finished introducing his team to the commander of the Varesti tribe. To those who were in coachman duties, take the wagons inside the camp, 13 ordered. The rest follow me. After giving out his order, 13 walked confidently toward Drazit and Sharrak, who were eyeing them from a distance. The teenage boy was thankful that they arrived at the right time, which benefited their position in the Varesti tribe's forces. Since they were able to save them from being overwhelmed by the enemies, the treatment they'd receive would definitely be better than the wanderers who were currently in their camp. "It's an honor to meet you, great commander." 13 pressed his fist over his chest and gave Drazit a respectful bow. "My name is Zion Leventis, and we have come to aid you in battle. Feel free to just call me Zion." "Well met, child," Drazit replied. "Your archery skills are good. Make sure to continue to put it to good use." After saying those words, the commander of the lizardmen turned around to check the reports of his subordinates. They had suffered many casualties during the sudden raid by the rat men, and because of this, he planned to change camp to a place that would be easier to defend with their current numbers. 13 watched as the rank 5 alpha monster walked away to do his duty. Although he had a calm expression on his face, deep inside, he already knew the fate of all the Varesti tribe's defenders who were protecting the Fangea swamp. "They're going to lose for sure," 13 thought. A glance was enough for him to know that Drazit was a cannon fodder. This meant that someone powerful from the Ratman clan would come to take the commander's head at a later time, boosting that monster's influence among its kin. Knowing his final outcome, 13 knew that he needed to make his own preparations to prevent the worst-case scenario from happening. Just as he expected, the lizard men were forced to move their camp to somewhere easier to defend. The recent attacks of the rat men had been fierce, and cost them many lives. At this moment, there were only a little over than 500 lizard men remaining in the camp who could still fight. A few hundred were injured, and they would be unable to fight for many days until they recovered from their injury. 13, who had asked Drazit to give him control over the other humans, managed to convince the commander that the humans would be able to fight better under his command. Drazit thought that it wouldn't be a bad idea, especially since 13 had helped them overcome their dire situation as soon as he arrived. The number of humans in his army was only around 20 anyway, so letting Zion command them wouldn't affect the bigger picture. At least, that was what Drazit thought when he made the decision. These wanderers were more than happy to become part of 13's group, because they recognized him the moment he appeared in their camp. All in all, the number of wanderers who were now under 13's command was nearly 100. While the lizardmen were doing their business, 13 gathered all the wanderers for a meeting. According to the commander, there are at least 2,000 ratmen in the Pangea swamp, 13 stated. However, that number is still growing by the day because they are constantly receiving new reinforcements from the other ratmen clans. I will be honest with you, guys, I think this outpost will not be able to hold out for long. 13 believed that telling the truth to the wanderers would help them understand how perilous their current situation was. With this knowledge, he wanted them to listen to his every word as if their lives depended on it. "Are you telling us that we're going to die here?" Elyon asked. "You will, but only if you don't listen to me," 13 answered. "My goal is to ensure that many of you will survive. Of course, I am not a god, so I cannot guarantee all of your safety. However, if you wish for at least a chance to live, you should follow my orders without fail, no matter how ridiculous it may seem." The teenage boy then scanned the faces of the wanderers, who all looked at him with grim expressions on their faces. "Who wants to return to Pangea?" 13 asked. "Raise your right hand." All wanderers raised their hands without batting an eye. Even Elyon, who was always at odds with Sean and 13, raised his hand because he wanted to live. "Very well. All of you should rest for now, while I survey the surroundings," 13 said. "I'll look for an escape route we could take, just in case the ratmen manage to break past our defenses. Eat up and rest up. Sherry, assign watchman. The ratmen can return anytime, so make sure to rest as much as you can to recover from the fatigue from our long journey." After giving out his orders, 13 climbed the highest tree he could find, allowing him to get a better view of the surrounding area. The Pangea swamp was advantageous to the lizardmen at the beginning because they could move faster in it compared to the ratmen. But after the water source had been corrupted by the enemies, the lizardmen had no choice but to retreat and were even forced to fight the enemy on land. Although they had no problem in doing this, fighting in the swamp granted them mobility and flexibility when it came to choosing their battles. With Tiona's and Rocky's help, 13 was able to understand the general layout of the land and began to formulate an escape route that they could use to flee if things were to go south. He was already thinking about escaping because he understood that the lizardmen might not be able to hold out for long. Of course, he only planned to escape at the last minute when things were truly dire. His other problem was how he'd convince the lizardman commander, Drazit, to flee with him when the time was right. Lizardmen were prideful monsters, and 13th's Overlord Beetle could only control rank 4 monsters and below. Since Drazit was a rank 5 alpha monster, one would be unable to forcefully make him obey him using mind control. "Rocky, make sure to create pitfalls for now," 13 ordered the Magma Balboa to dig at the escape route he had chosen. The more the better. Rocky obeyed his master and began to dig as instructed. With their escape route being prepared, 13 asked Tiona to summon her clone to do a scouting mission on enemy territory. Since the corruption of the swamp wouldn't affect Tiona's clone, it could easily swim on the corrupted waters without any problems. When it came to war, information was key. He needed to know how strong the Ratman's commander was, and if there were any high-ranking officers whom he could dominate using Gwen's mind control. 3 hours later, Tiona's clone finally made its report. Since Tiona and her clone could communicate with each other over long distances, there was no problem sharing information in real time. But the information that 13 obtained wasn't something that made him happy. In fact, It made him realize how terrifying the force that they were about to face the next time the Ratmen attacked. 2 rank 5 alpha monsters and 50 rank 4 monsters, 13 mused. This is bad. Really bad. The Varesti tribe also had rank 4 monsters, but they only numbered less than 20. The majority of their forces were peak rank 1 and rank 2 monsters who had only been able to hold out because Drazit always fought in the front lines, preventing his weaker soldiers from dying easily. But that would no longer be possible because the Ratman's reinforcements just arrived, and it was led by another rank 5 alpha monster whom 13 believed was the one who would kill Drazit in battle. The commander of the Varesti tribe was a cannon fodder, and he was fated to die to become a stepping stone. Of course, 13 didn't want this to happen. If only he could wrest control of the lizardmen from Drazit, he would be able to come up with a way on how they would be able to survive the upcoming raid. As he pondered on what to do, he sensed a movement in the distance away, making him narrow his eyes. Hundreds of meters away from him, something was moving under the cover of the trees. It might be a Ratman scout, 13 thought. I'll eliminate it first. The teenage boy then descended from the tree and ran in the direction where he saw the figure wearing a black robe that covered their body. They were currently at war, and any suspicious individual must be captured or eliminated to ensure that his people would not suffer from being stabbed in the back. When 13 was only dozens of meters from his target, he immediately felt something dangerous in his surroundings, so he took evasive action. A second later, the place where he was standing was hit by something, making the ground burst from the impact. Understanding that his opponent was well versed in detecting the presence of people around them, he decided to take out his bow and arrow. His goal wasn't to kill, but to hinder his opponent from attacking him until he got close enough to verify their identity. From that simple exchange, he understood that the chances of this robed individual being a human were high. First and foremost, it didn't have a tail. With this knowledge in mind, 13 needed to ensure that he wouldn't accidentally kill his target before he got a chance to interrogate them. The robed figure, who realized that someone was tailing her from behind, didn't hesitate to unleash a spell to hit the target's location. The opponent was masking their presence, but it was easy for her to detect them due to the abilities she possessed. They managed to dodge that, the rogue figure thought, seeing that her preemptive strike didn't land on her target. It seems that this stalker is more skilled than I thought. Thinking that it was pointless to continue her mission, the robed figure chose to retreat as fast as she could. However, a faint whistling sound reached her ears, prompting her to summon a small magical shield to protect herself. But before she could raise her shield, the arrow hit her robe and pinned her to the tree beside her. Understanding that her opponent was extremely skilled, she decided to unleash a barrage of spells to give her some time to break free from being pinned from the tree. 13, who was only dozens of meters away from his target, found numerous magical bullets flying in his direction. Instead of panicking, the young man used the trees as cover to block the incoming magical projectiles. The sound of minor explosions spread in the surroundings as the trees 13 had used as shields collapsed on the ground. Since nothing was blocking his vision, he was able to take a good look at his opponent. The robed figure was wearing a mask, which prevented him from seeing their face. I need to get closer, 13 thought as he aimed his bow at his target and unleashed 2 arrows in rapid succession. The robed figure had just freed themselves from the tree and had no intention of letting themselves be pinned down a second time. With this in mind, she used a spell that burst in front of her, repelling the arrow flying in her direction. Just as she had regained her composure, another arrow came flying in her direction, forcing her to use her burst spell for the second time in order to repel it. The robed figure was now really pissed with the one attacking her, so she decided to cast a powerful spell that would obliterate everything in front of her. However, just as she was preparing to cast the spell, her target stepped out from behind a tree with a smirk plastered on his face. "Erica, is that you?" 13 asked. Although the robed figure was wearing a mask, her fighting style was definitely the sorceress he had taught during the time that they were together. Zion, Erica, who recognized the annoying stalker, gasped in shock. "What are you doing here? Why else?" 13 stored his bow and walked towards the young lady, who had already removed her mask and was running in his direction. "I'm here because I was sent here by the one." Erica, who had already come close to Zion, immediately hugged the boy and squeezed him tight. "You brat, are you trying to kill me?" Erica asked as she used a headlock on the boy who was shooting arrows at her earlier. "I'm not," 13 replied in a calm manner, despite being ill-treated by the young lady. "I'm just pinning you to the tree earlier because I wanted to know your identity." Erica was a sorceress, so she didn't have enough strength to hurt the teenage boy with her headlock. This was why 13 wasn't really affected by her futile attempt to hurt him, and answered casually. "You're lucky I was going easy on you earlier," Erica said. "If I had been serious, you would have been toast by now." The two bickered for a while before Erica finally released the teenage boy and started asking him questions. 13 answered them all and told the sorceress about their current situation, which made her frown. Erica also told Zion what she had been doing since she arrived in Solterra, and frankly, the teenage boy was impressed because he didn't expect that Erica had what it took to do what she was currently doing right now. Simply put, Erica and a few wanderers, who had been summoned in the same location, were currently trying to save the younger wanderers who had been captured by the Lizardmen tribes and the Ratmen clans. They were like a bandit group that came and went as they pleased, acting as a third party in the war. Currently, Erica and her comrades had managed to save over 50 wanderers and were sheltering them in a cave not far from the Fangus Swamp. Because of the recent escalation in the war between the Lizardmen and the Ratmen, the older wanderers had to scout different locations to see whether they should evacuate or not. Erica decided to scout the region where the fighting was more intense because she was confident that she could escape if needed. 13 had given her the Fire Lord's ring, which had a divine-ranked martial skill imbued on it. This allowed Erica to use the martial skill called Advent of the Flame Empress, which greatly increased the effectiveness and firepower of all her fire-based spells. "Come with me, Zion," Erica stated. "With you leading us, we can definitely pull through this together." Erica was expecting the teenage boy to agree to her request, but to her surprise, the teenage boy shook his head. "I can't," 13 replied. "Do you see this mark on my forehead? This is a symbol of the Varesti tribe. It had a tracking spell placed on it. All the wanderers with me have the same symbol, so the shaman would know our location at all times." "No way. How can you let this happen to you?" Erica, who had considered the teenage boy as someone stronger than her, couldn't accept what happened to him. Of course, the symbol on 13's forehead actually had no effect on him whatsoever. But that didn't mean that the other wanderers wouldn't be affected by it. For Erica's own safety, he deemed it best that his group and her group didn't interact for now. However, this didn't mean that he didn't find this current situation very appealing to him. "I have a plan," 13 said, "and I believe that if we work together, we will be able to rescue the other wanderers faster." "What is it?" Erica didn't bat an eye and took the teenage boy's words seriously. 13 explained the plan he had in mind, as well as a surefire way to keep the lines of communication for Erica and him. "Go now," 13 said. "Contact me once you return to your group." "Understood." Erica nodded before shifting her gaze to the snake armlet that was currently in her arm. Tiona's clone would allow her and Zion to communicate and share the information that both of them possessed. "Also, I met a friendly monster along the way," 13 said as Blackie appeared beside him. "His name is Blackie, and he will be staying with you for the time being to keep you safe." Erica almost jumped out in fright when she saw the 2-meter-tall Nightmare Blackhound, who was a rank 6 sovereign. Is this an avatar?" Erica stuttered. "I thought you can't have avatars. Didn't you listen to what I told you just now?" 13 arched an eyebrow. "Blackie isn't an avatar. He's a real monster I met not long ago. I fed him a few scraps of meat, and because of that, he took a liking to me." Blackie rolled his eyes at Zion, knowing very well that this wasn't the true story of how they first met. However, since he and the teenage boy now got along very well, he decided to not bring up the past and simply follow the order given to him to protect Erica from harm. "For now, tell your comrades that Blackie is your avatar," 13 said. "It will be easier for them to accept this explanation." "All right." Erica, who was still very intimidated by the rank 6 sovereign, couldn't help but look at it warily. "You won't eat me, right?" "You won't," 13 stated. "Just trust me, okay?" After a little more convincing, Erica reluctantly climbed up on Black's back and used him as a mount to return to the cave where her comrades were staying. Only when the sorceress was gone did 13 sigh and rub his face with his hands. "Since there are apostles involved, this means that this mission is more dangerous than I initially expected," 13 thought. "But with Erica here, I now have an outside force I can control remotely." The teenager glanced in the direction where Erica had disappeared one last time before turning away and going back to the camp where the other wanderers were waiting for him. For the time being, he didn't plan to tell any of them about his discovery because it would destroy the unity they had now. If they knew that the sorceress of the hero party was somewhere out there, saving wanderers like them, their resolve would waver and might make them less likely to obey 13's orders. In order to prevent that from happening, he would keep Erica's existence a secret for now until the right opportunity presented itself.